I've had enough of being walked all over. As the broke kid everyone in the village looks down on, I've decided to use the most useless job class, compounder, to make sure every single person who ever looked down on me ends up way out of their league. The scene in front of me is clearly something I've never seen before, yet it feels strangely familiar. This feeling of déjà vu, it's been popping up ever since I can remember. Almost like the world was always meant to look exactly like this. Just as I drifted into thought, a staff member's voice snapped me back to reality. I turned to look at her and suddenly froze. Even this person in front of me, I feel like I've seen her somewhere before. Before I could sort out my thoughts, she informed me that everything was ready. I could begin the adventurer registration whenever I was set. She gestured for me to bring my right hand close to the sensor panel ahead. The moment my palm was about to make contact with the sensor, the overwhelming sense of déjà vu finally found its source. It hit me all at once. This was no illusion. These were memories from my past life. I had actually experienced this world before. That's right. This place was the world of the game I had once been completely obsessed with. 7 continents. A virtual world where adventurers journeyed across 7 lands and kept the peace. Wait, what exactly is going on? Memories of that world were flooding into my mind, completely beyond my control. I used to be just an ordinary young man with a dream, to become an adventurer, make a name for myself, earn big money, and give my family a better life. But the world I've lived in my entire life was actually a game I played in my past life. This feeling, it's like suddenly being handed a full walkthrough guide. Why did my memories suddenly awaken? Digging into that right now serves no purpose. What matters is that I can use these memories to stage a perfect comeback and wipe the smug looks off everyone's faces. Just then, I heard the staff member ask with concern in her voice. She must have noticed my body trembling involuntarily. I steadied myself and told her I was fine, just a little excited. My gaze fell on the status window slowly materializing before me. My heart was filled with anticipation. The staff member smiled and wished me a smooth journey ahead. My adventure had officially begun. The moment I stepped outside, the sunlight was almost blinding. I instinctively raised a hand to shield my eyes. I was now standing at the altar of baptism. Even this place was identical to the game. According to the game's design, the beginner tutorial would gather 5 newcomers here. So far, everything was unfolding exactly as I remembered. As long as I made good use of the knowledge in my head, the dream of making it as an adventurer might not be such a pipe dream after all. The difference was, this was the real world. There was only one life. No loading a save file and starting over. A broadcast announcement rang out right on cue, declaring the baptism ceremony would begin in 30 seconds. Everyone was told to select their preferred equipment first. Sure enough, even the exact wording of the broadcast was spot on. Equipment selection has always been first come, first served. I scanned the area. All kinds of weapons came into view. The scramble kicked off immediately. People were shouting and shoving, some getting physical. I had witnessed this exact scene play out on a screen countless times before, because this world, just like the game, has a forced class system. Your performance during the baptism ceremony directly determines which classes you'll have access to in the future. That mechanic gave me no end of grief back when I was a player. I had to restart from scratch over and over just to get a decent starting hand. After everyone locked in their weapons, a bald guy nearby let out a snort. He leaned over and muttered that everything left was just worthless junk no one wanted. I ignored the pointless provocation and simply gave a flat thanks for the heads up. That seemed to annoy him. He probably figured I was deliberately brushing him off, but whatever. Let him think what he wants. My eyes had already zeroed in on my target. I took a few steps forward and slowly came to a stop in front of a short sword. Its item info appeared: an ordinary short sword, F rank, with a laughably low attack stat, but surprisingly solid durability. The bald guy leaned in again with a sneer, warning me the attack power was only 1 and I'd better not end up stuck with a garbage class. It's true, your class almost entirely determines the ceiling of an adventurer's strength. That's common knowledge, but here's the thing. What if that common knowledge itself is wrong? Conventional wisdom doesn't apply to someone who carries memories of a past life as a hardcore player. Right on cue, the broadcast sounded again to announce the baptism ceremony was about to officially begin. 5-minute time limit. Our goal was to defeat as many enemies known as winged centipedes as possible. These creatures carry a paralytic venom. One misstep and you'd find yourself completely on the back foot. The bald guy gave me a sarcastic good luck, joking that I'd better not drop dead on the spot. What a bizarre guy. I decided to tune him out completely. After all, whether in a game or in real life, there's always someone like him. Loud, obnoxious, and itching to start trouble. Alright then. Let the baptism ceremony begin. The winged centipedes that appeared, their look and movement patterns, were a perfect match for the game's design. If that's the case, their weak points should be exactly as I remembered too. Sure, critical hit detection might be a bit stricter in reality, but it's worth a shot. I immediately drew the ordinary short sword. Watching for the right moment, I lunged toward the charging centipede and drove the blade home. Then, a flick of the wrist, a sweeping slash. A system notification popped up instantly, confirming I had successfully defeated the target. A few stifled gasps rippled through the crowd. My clean one-hit kill had clearly caught them off guard. I didn't pause. I tightened my grip on the short sword and moved on to find the next target. The bald guy watched from nearby, muttering dismissively that I just got lucky and told me not to get cocky. Every game has its exploits. call them glitches or tricks, and the real-world baptism ceremony is no exception. Its exclusive exploit is this: use the ordinary short sword, land a precise strike on the winged centipede's vital point, and you get a guaranteed one-hit kill. That mechanic, completely identical to the game, which means the strategy knowledge locked away in my head works perfectly in the real world too. Meanwhile, the others were still locked in rough fights with the winged centipedes, most of them looking completely overwhelmed. The bald guy finally managed to take one down and immediately broke into triumphant laughter. He announced at the top of his lungs that his goal was to become a swordsman, one of the strongest classes. I figured he was just trying to throw everyone else off with the noise. That's even lower than what you'd see from a player in the game. Suddenly, a winged centipede came in from the side without warning. I reacted fast and barely managed to dodge with a sideways twist. Before I could even regain my footing, another one lunged right after. But the rhythm of real combat, somehow it got the blood pumping far more than clicking through a screen ever did. My heart was hammering. Maybe this real world would turn out to be more exciting than any game. I steadied my nerves, waited for the right moment, and with no wasted movement, swung the short sword in place with pinpoint precision. Another winged centipede down, and right then, the countdown hit 0. The baptism ceremony was officially over. The system began assigning available class options based on each person's kill count. Someone had taken down 7 centipedes, 3 class options to choose from. Only 7 kills. No surprise, there were no decent options. Another person had 0 kills and immediately lost the right to continue as an adventurer. The bald guy meanwhile burst into wild laughter. He'd taken out 15 centipedes in total. Sure enough, swordsman had appeared among his class options. I looked down at my own status window and fell into a brief moment of thought. The bald guy made a point of walking over, and with a noticeably mocking tone asked how things were looking on my end. But when he actually saw what was on my screen, he just stood there, completely stunned. My kill count read 33, and the list of available classes below it was staggering. Every single base class was included. The bald guy blinked for a few seconds, then quickly played dumb, turned and walked away, stubbornly claiming he'd also gotten the swordsman option. For the record, taking down 15 and having swordsman show up carried a probability of less than 2%. If anyone got lucky here, it was him. In this world, the most sought-after classes among adventurers are undoubtedly swordsman and summoner. But for me, which class to choose had been decided in my heart long before this moment. The system promptly displayed a confirmation. I had selected the compounder class, and a starter gear set was included as a bonus. The moment the system finished speaking, a collective sharp intake of breath rose from the crowd around me. The bald guy looked genuinely baffled. The compounder was the weakest, most useless class there was. With the class confirmed, my personal info updated simultaneously. Class compounder, level 1. 1 class skill, compound. My inventory was now officially unlocked. Whether or not compounder is the weakest class has never depended on the class itself. It all comes down to who's using it and how. As for why I pushed to kill 33 winged centipedes, the only goal was to gather specific materials that only drop during this ceremony. I quickly scanned my inventory. Winged centipede tails, wings, blood, all accounted for, along with the ordinary short sword. The class skill compound allows me to craft specific items at the cost of 12 MP. Without hesitation, I activated the compound function. The reason I chose this seemingly useless class, it was all for this moment, for this piece of gear, a piece of gear powerful enough to completely shatter the balance of this world, something that defies all expectations. A system notification confirmed a successful compound. A brand new weapon materialized in my hands. Its name was Centipede's Edge. Attack power 66, exceptional durability, skill 1, Eagle Eye, an active skill that triples damage when striking a vital point. 2 more skills remain locked and require specific conditions to unlock. As a devoted player who had once sunk countless hours into this game, I had finally, in the real world, crafted my very first hidden equipment piece with my own hands. Its true strength lies in allowing a person to stand their ground through gear alone, without being entirely dependent on levels or skills. Now that I've secured the first hidden piece according to plan, it's time to start the journey. The main street of the first continent. Everything before my eyes was a perfect match with the game's design. Weapon shops at street corners, bystanders clustered together watching the excitement, vendors pushing carts, hawking fresh fruit along the roadside. The ultimate goal in the real world is straightforward enough. Each of the 7 continents has one S-rank dungeon. Take down the Demon King inside, and that's that. No need to overthink it. The most pressing thing right now is to enter a dungeon and build up my strength. By conventional procedure, adventurers start with the lowest F-rank dungeons and work their way up gradually. The target I chose was the C-rank dungeon, Guardian's Nesting Forest. The clear condition for this dungeon is to defeat the Demon King lurking within. The moment I stepped into the dungeon's boundary, a system notification popped up confirming my entry. It also noted that I would be unable to leave until the clear condition was met. I checked my current status, then recalled that this dungeon's recommended clear level was somewhere between 17 and 30. With my current level 1 defense and starter gear, choosing this place could genuinely be called an adventure. Just as that thought crossed my mind, a level 17 demon plant appeared up ahead. I tightened my grip on the Centipede's Edge short sword. I knew what to expect, but the level gap of 16 was still daunting. A single hit from that thing could probably end me right there. The demon plant launched its attack without warning, faster than I'd imagined, but I already knew its attack patterns by heart from the game. More than that, the way it was positioned right now, it was practically laying its weak points bare for me to see. I picked my moment, swung the short sword, and the demon plant went down. A system notification confirmed a critical hit, triggering the active skill Eagle Eye. Better still, taking down an enemy with such a massive level gap meant the experience reward was exceptionally generous. I was now level 10. Both HP and MP had automatically recovered, and each level up came with 5 attribute points to freely distribute across any stat. My attack power was already more than sufficient, so I put every single point into defense. Progress was moving faster than expected. Centipede's Edge's active skill Eagle Eye was incredibly practical. Combined with its 66 attack power, I could comfortably take on even B-rank dungeons on the first continent now. But the weapon's true value went far beyond even that. Things were getting more and more interesting. For now, the plan was simple: push toward the Demon King at the dungeon's deepest point and keep leveling up along the way. I hadn't gone far before I sensed something off about my surroundings. This is bad. I was surrounded. 3 black serpents, each around level 23 or 24, appeared right in front of me. In this dungeon, they were classified as mid-boss tier monsters, and the odds of 3 appearing at the same time, I clearly remembered it was under 1%. Before I could think it through, the black serpents lunged at me in a biting strike, their ferocious and aggressive nature exactly as the game described. I took a deep breath and told myself to stay calm. I knew their movement patterns inside and out. I knew exactly where their weak points were. Sure, every part of a black serpent's body except for the neck is unusually tough, but as long as I targeted the weak point precisely and struck without hesitation, it would deal a fatal blow, a one-hit kill. But to my surprise, my attack missed. What happened? Oh no, one of the other black serpents had used its body to shield its ally from my strike, and in the next instant, the third serpent sank its fangs deep into my shoulder. Damn, its fangs were buried in my flesh. I couldn't shake it off. Fighting through the searing pain, I spun around and brought Centipede's Edge sweeping back in one motion. The serpent biting me was severed in a single slash. As the system notified me of the experience gained, a red warning flashed. My HP had plummeted to just 8 points. My status was now near death. But all of this was well within my calculations. When I allocated attribute points during my earlier level UPS, I had deliberately put everything into defense to ensure that at full HP, no single attack from any monster in this dungeon could kill me outright, and the moment I needed to trigger a key condition had arrived. The next second, a system notification popped. The unlock condition for Centipede's Edge's second skill had been met. Godspeed is a passive skill that multiplies the agility stat by 10, but it only activates when the equipped user is in a near-death state. Riding the extraordinary speed granted by Godspeed, I dispatched the remaining 2 black serpents with ease and collected a hefty amount of experience. My level began climbing continuously, shooting all the way up to level 17 in one go. All things considered, a successful level up, nearly dying in the process aside. By all logic, I should restore my HP immediately, but the moment I did, the powerful near-death agility X effect would vanish, and I wasn't ready to give up that edge just yet. Besides, with my knowledge and experience, continuing forward in this state was completely manageable. Of course, I wasn't foolish enough to take another hit that could actually finish me off. I pressed deeper into the forest. The scattered mobs I encountered along the way were no match for the extreme speed Godspeed provided, and thanks to the tenfold boost in agility, the efficiency with which I was racking up experience was significantly higher. As long as I could maintain this leveling pace before the Demon King appeared, I'd have more than enough to face what came next. Before officially challenging the Demon King, however, I needed to figure out how to compound the key item first. I began mentally going through all the materials required to craft it. The list of materials was extensive: water, thornweed, acid berries, caterpillars, skull jelly leaves, blood blooms, scorched seed pods. Just listing them all was already a handful. For a mere D-rank item, this was needlessly complicated. The real world's insistence on authenticity, honestly a little annoying. No wonder part of the player base complained about it back in the day. But complaining won't change anything. The priority right now is gathering every single required material before running into the Demon King. I continued pushing forward into the dungeon's depths, while keeping an eye on my surroundings and gathering the materials I needed. Things were moving along reasonably well. I'd found the acid berries, just a few more items, and I'd have everything. Then suddenly, a voice came from behind me. I turned around to see a familiar face. It was blonde-haired man from my village, with a man I'd never seen standing beside him. The moment blonde-haired man opened his mouth, it was that familiar tone, laced with contempt. He was an adventurer too, and he tossed out something as charming as stray dog like it was nothing. I remembered he'd left to become an adventurer 2 or 3 years ago. How was he still wandering around a beginner zone like this? He looked over my gear, clocked my compounder class, and broke into shameless laughter, mocking me for being too broke to afford decent equipment. The stranger beside him got curious and asked who I was. Blonde-haired man was happy to oblige, laying everything out in his signature exaggerated, cutting tone. How my family was the poorest in the village, how my father had passed away, how my mother was bedridden. Then he capped it off by saying that knowing someone like me made him feel embarrassed. He wasn't wrong. I became an adventurer to earn money and change my family's situation, but hearing it come out of his mouth just made it sting that much more. Blonde-haired man kept rambling on, and when he got no reaction from me, he stepped forward and grabbed me by the collar. At that exact moment of tension, a deafening roar erupted from deep within the forest and cut through everything. Both blonde-haired man and I instinctively turned toward it. Blonde-haired man's companion went pale in an instant. A system notification followed immediately. Demon King, Cyclops has appeared, level 31. Blonde-haired man panicked and screamed at his companion to run. I shook my head internally. Too late. The man had already been marked by the Cyclops. A heartbeat later, the Cyclops raised its weapon and brought it crashing down. Blonde-haired man's companion didn't even have time to react before he was dead. It was only in that moment that it truly hit me. Death in this world was real and permanent. The brutal sight drained the strength from blonde-haired man's legs, and he collapsed to the ground on the spot. With one target dealt with, the Cyclops slowly turned its massive head and fixed its gaze on the rest of us. I knew all too well, its defense was absurdly high. My centipede's edge short sword would struggle to deal any meaningful damage to it. While I was still thinking, the Cyclops had already launched an attack in my direction. I sprang back immediately to dodge. A system notification in the next second informed me I had been marked by the Cyclops. At the same time, due to the effect of singular eye, I had no way to flee from this fight. Looks like I had no choice but to push through head-on. The good news was, the Cyclops' attack patterns were something I already knew inside and out. And thanks to God's speed, my movement speed was more than sufficient to handle its attacks. The Cyclops' relentless strikes came one after another, but I evaded each one by a razor-thin margin. Blonde-haired man, slumped on the ground nearby, seemed to be staring in disbelief, unable to accept that the person in front of him was the very same person he'd been mocking all along. I knew well enough that endlessly dodging was pointless. It would just keep draining my stamina. I needed to seize an opening and counter. Finally, I spotted a window right after the Cyclops launched an attack. I followed the arc of its weapon as it came crashing down, stepped onto its arm, and ran up toward its body. The Cyclops seemed momentarily caught off guard, but its heavy, lumbering movements were no match for my high-speed maneuvering. I used the momentum to leap upward, clearing the air and landing behind its back. Centipede's edge came down hard, targeting the unguarded weak point at the back of its neck, but the Cyclops barely let out a low grunt. The blade couldn't cut through its hardened hide just as I feared. The attack had virtually no effect. It left nothing but a shallow scratch on that rough skin. The Cyclops snapped its head around, that enormous single eye locking onto me. Its weapon came whistling down toward me with a vengeance. I jumped sideways immediately and landed on the ground. With such a massive level gap, taking it head-on was just too much to overcome. I glanced over at blonde-haired man. The guy had actually been smart enough to crawl into a corner of the underbrush. He was hiding there, quietly watching my standoff with the Cyclops unfold. All I hoped was that he'd stay out of my way. Conventional attacks were useless. I'd need a different approach. I'd already gathered some materials before all this. The remaining items I needed, according to the game's logic, should respawn in the area around the Demon King. I scanned around quickly. My eyes swept past where blonde-haired man was hiding, and I spotted exactly what I was looking for. I bolted straight toward him. The sudden movement startled a yelp out of him. I didn't have time for his panic. I swept past and snatched up those 3 materials on the fly. Then I sprinted toward a nearby stream. Perfect. Every required material was now accounted for. I stopped in my tracks and activated the compound skill. A system notification flashed instantly. Compound successful. I had successfully crafted a basic poison, an item that inflicts a poison status on the target, dealing damage over time. Blonde-haired man shouted out involuntarily from the side, pointing out that the Cyclops had high resistance to poison and the toxin would wear off fast. Of course I knew that. Using it directly was never the plan. I reached into my inventory and pulled out another item, the black serpent marrow I'd collected when I killed the black serpents earlier. I then placed the freshly compounded basic poison alongside the black serpent marrow into the compound interface for a second round of synthesis. The system confirmed another success. This time, the result was a lethal toxin, significantly more potent. Blonde-haired man's jaw dropped. He clearly hadn't anticipated that I could perform a second-tier compound, but my hands didn't stop there. I immediately activated the compound skill a third time. This time, I transferred the toxic effect of the lethal toxin directly onto Centipede's edge. Blonde-haired man watched this entire sequence play out and was left completely speechless. System notification, attribute transfer successful. Centipede's edge has gained a poison attribute. This is one facet of what Centipede's edge was always meant to be. The moment I finished everything, the Cyclops had already come roaring toward me. I turned to face it. Round 2, let's go. The Cyclops swung furiously and hit nothing but air. The impact sent dirt flying. I used the agility boost from Godspeed to dodge in rapid succession, while patiently waiting for my opening. Now, I leapt up again, landing behind its back. Centipede's edge, now carrying its poison attribute, came down hard. This time the blade cut clean into the flesh. The wound turned a deep, ominous shade of purple-black. A system notification confirmed the Cyclops had entered the lethal poison state, now taking damage over time, but its powerful constitution immediately kicked in to resist. The toxin was temporarily nullified. No matter, once wasn't enough. I'd go again. I kept moving, weaving around it, and every time an opening appeared, I put the blade in. The system confirmed it re-entered the lethal poison state, then the toxin was cleared again. Round and round this went, each strike wearing it down a little more. It was clear the poisoning approach was the right one. Its resistance wasn't infinite. Every time it fought off the toxin, it was burning through its already enormous stamina reserve. I took a deep breath, and the moment I saw it slow down from the pain, I leapt high into the air one final time. This time, the target was that massive single eye. The short sword drove home with perfect precision, burying itself directly into the Cyclops' eye. A system notification erupted, critical hit confirmed. Active skill Eagle Eye triggered, damage doubled. The Cyclops let out a howl, and its massive body crashed to the ground. The system congratulated me on successfully defeating Demon King Cyclops, rewarding a large sum of experience and drop items. Blonde-haired man cowering in the corner stared at the scene before him with eyes wide in disbelief. He never could have imagined the person he had bullied and looked down on back in the village could be this powerful. The moment our eyes met, sheer terror took over him. He scrambled away, tripping over himself to flee. I had no time to concern myself with where he'd gone. There were more important things to take care of right now. I took a moment to steady my breathing and opened my status screen. After defeating the Cyclops, my level had shot up to 23 in one go. I checked the dungeon boss subjugation reward. 350,000 gold coins successfully secured. That was a considerable sum. I needed to wire it back to my mother and sister as soon as possible. With the reward handled, I opened my inventory. Sitting quietly inside was the key drop item from this run, the Cyclops' eye. Not much to look at, honestly. But with this, crafting the next hidden piece of equipment would be straightforward. I then moved on to a D-ranked dungeon. According to the real world's rules, Demon Kings distributed across the 7 continents had to be defeated strictly in order. Without clearing the first Demon King, you couldn't progress any further. That said, before taking on the second Demon King, I needed to first obtain the second piece of hidden equipment. Unlocking the Fallen Goddess statue mechanism required both the Cyclops' eye and a cobalt bird feather. This dungeon was exactly where I had come specifically to find cobalt birds. Of course, I couldn't afford to fall behind on leveling either. I needed to keep building strength during this stretch. Every monster in the way would be taken out. Good practice and good experience. My ultimate goal was crystal clear: defeat every Demon King and create a world free from the threat of hostile creatures. Earn a lot of money. Give my family a good life. And as a bonus, make sure every person in that village who ever looked down on me finally shuts up. I firmly believed that as long as I became strong enough, all of it was possible. Meanwhile, back in town, the Adventurers Guild's daily news report was playing on a loop. It mentioned that a new adventurer had set a record a few days ago at the baptism ceremony, taking down 33 winged centipedes. Another segment reported a surge in illegal cobalt bird poaching incidents, with witnesses spotting a suspicious group of adventurers catching them in large numbers. But out in the field grinding levels, I had no idea what was playing on the news back in town. I was still puzzled by how long I'd been searching without catching a single glimpse of a cobalt bird. I had picked up a few other scattered materials along the way, but what I urgently needed right now was a cobalt bird feather, and nothing else could substitute for it. Cobalt birds weren't even rare creatures to begin with. By all logic, they shouldn't have been this hard to find. Each continent has 7 dungeons, ranked from F to A across 6 tiers, and 1 S-ranked dungeon per continent where a Demon King resides. Cobalt birds were D-ranked creatures of the first continent, and this open plain was supposed to be one of their most common habitats. After coming up empty-handed across the plain, I had no choice but to give up for the time being and head back to town to ask around. I remembered there was a general goods store somewhere in this part of town. The owner there tended to be well informed. Following my memory, I found the shop. Just as I raised my hand to push the door open, I heard a burst of chaotic footsteps and loud, aggressive shouting. The next second, the door was flung open from inside and a group of people came striding out. When they spotted me in the doorway, they roughly shoved me aside and walked off without a care. Then they noticed a mother and young daughter blocking their path ahead. One of them impatiently raised his hand and shoved the little girl. These bastards. This was beyond unacceptable. The little girl stumbled from the push, teetering right on the edge of the tall steps. I rushed forward and caught her, then carried both of us safely down to flat ground in one motion. The girl's mother, pale as a sheet, rushed over and wrapped her daughter in a tight embrace, thanking me over and over. The thugs who had done the pushing, on the other hand, showed zero remorse. They just kept walking, never even glancing back. At that point, the general store owner came running out, saying his shop had been completely cleaned out. I asked for the details, and with a heavy sigh he explained that group were members of the Hyena Guild. They'd been using this area as their base of operations lately, running protection rackets and poaching. They were well known as one of the worst outfits around. That gave me the intelligence I needed, but it came with a problem. The cobalt bird feathers were clearly in their hands. The owner kept sighing, adding that these people terrorized the area without restraint, not even sparing ordinary people, women and children. His shop had been forced to close. A guild, put simply, is a group of adventurers who share similar beliefs and goals, typically with no shortage of members. Going up against an entire guild on my own would get messy fast, but these people were not only causing trouble for innocent bystanders, they were also poaching cobalt birds and getting in my way. This score wasn't one I could let go, so I decided to follow them and see what I was dealing with. With the advantage granted by Godspeed, I caught up to the group quickly. To avoid tipping them off, I ducked quietly into the shadows of a nearby street corner to observe. I overheard them talking about how they'd already squeezed most of the nearby shops dry. Time to move on to the next location and keep at it there. After that, a few of them started up casual conversation, while lazily hauling their stolen goods along. I swept my eyes over the loot. Sure enough, cobalt bird feathers were right there among it all. So they were the ones behind the large-scale cobalt bird poaching. That confirmed it. But there were a lot of them. I needed to think of a smart way to handle this. I was bent in thought when a sharp shout rang out from behind me. Spotted? Was that the rogue stealth skill? I hadn't sensed anyone approaching at all. I'd let my guard down. At this point, I tried to play it off as if I'd just been passing through, like nothing was going on. But the person was convinced I was up to no good, and drew a short sword without a second word. No choice. I'd have to defend myself first. With a thought, Centipede's edge materialized in my hand in an instant. I shifted to the side to avoid his strike, then drove my foot precisely into his shin. As his balance gave way for just a moment, I brought my hand up sharply and struck the back of his neck with a firm chop. He went down without even a grunt. The commotion from this scuffle quickly drew the attention of the other thugs. They rushed over and closed in around me. I tried to explain calmly. I had no interest in a fight, I just wanted the cobalt bird feathers. But when they saw their fallen comrade, they immediately branded me an enemy and started screaming about taking me out. There were quite a few of them, but if reason wasn't going to work, then force would have to settle it. The Hyena Guild members saw what happened and immediately closed in around me, every one of them with murder in their eyes. The guy at the front swung his sword straight at my head. I pushed his arm aside, then swept my short sword across his face. Blood trickled down his cheek in an instant. I had actually pulled my blow. I struck him with the flat of the blade. Getting into a full-blown fight and drawing the entire guild down on me was the last thing I needed. I was still trying to figure out how to talk my way through this when someone came at me from behind with a spear. I sensed the threat and dropped into a sharp crouch, just clearing the spearhead. I followed through by snapping my leg up in a kick, throwing off his rhythm, then quickly shifted to the side and grabbed the shaft of the incoming spear. Before he could react, I followed up with a fist driven hard into his chest. The system immediately popped a notification: critical hit confirmed. Active skill Eagle Eye triggered. The skill was supposed to double damage. This punch alone was enough to take him out of the fight entirely. I'd barely finished with him when a hulking guy came barreling at me with an axe, not even giving me a second to breathe. I stepped nimbly to the side and came back with the butt of my sword cracking him under the chin. He hit the ground with a dull groan. Honestly, I never wanted to fight any of them. These people came at me of their own accord. Since talking clearly wasn't working, dragging this out any longer was just a waste of time. I was about to go get the feathers myself when I caught the faint sound of an attack incoming from behind. My guard went up instantly. I spun around and brought my arm up to block. It was the guy with the stealth skill, the very same thug leader I'd spotted on the street earlier. He announced that he was the Hyena Guild's vice captain, then proudly introduced himself by name. I'd never heard of him, just another nobody with no reputation to speak of. He stared at me for a moment, before recognizing me as the person he'd shoved aside on the street. He snarled that he should have taken me out right then and there, would have saved himself the trouble. That line belonged to me, if anything. Lowlifes like him deserve to get put down every time they showed up. I glanced casually at the weapon in his hand, and remarked offhand that for someone who'd stolen so much, he was carrying pretty cheap hardware. He scoffed and shot back that I'd just gotten lucky with a decent weapon. Then he had the nerve to say that the real thrill of being an adventurer was developing class skills. Equipment was just decoration, irrelevant. I traded a few blows with him and gave some non-committal responses. That set him off immediately. He snapped that I had the gall to look down on him. One look at my starter gear, and anyone could tell I was a rookie. He declared I was riding entirely on that rare weapon of mine. He even insisted I'd never faced a real adventurer before, and had no idea how combat actually worked. The moment he finished that speech, he activated his skill. The single short sword in his hand split apart in an instant. Dozens of blades materialized at once. A heartbeat later, that storm of sword shadows came shrieking through the air straight at me. I rotated my wrist quickly and deflected them without much trouble. Seeing his attack fail, he shifted tactics, said that in a fight between adventurers, once your class is figured out, you're at an absolute disadvantage. He was convinced I was a compounder who could only use the compound skill, and that all he had to do was watch for my sword arm. He gloated that I had no idea what class or skills he had, and that he had this duel locked up. I casually pointed out that someone who could use a stealth skill was a rogue, wasn't it? He really was simple. He snapped defensively that he was not a rogue, he was a summoner. I gave a short "oh" and quietly felt a little sorry for him, but I quickly pulled my focus back. If he still had access to a rogue steal skill, things could get complicated. If Centipede's edge got taken, the consequences would be dire. So I stopped waiting and charged at him instead. I wanted to end this quickly and get out of this drawn-out mess. Right at that moment, several people suddenly came bursting out of the shadows. It turned out quite a few. Members of the Hyena Guild were skilled in these stealth-type abilities. They moved fast and in perfect coordination, surrounding me layer by layer, cutting off any room to break through. In the critical moment, I threw myself into a quick flip to clear their rush. Using that brief opening, I broke free of the encirclement and launched an attack at the vice captain. The strike was rushed, though. I misjudged the angle and hit the wrong spot by accident. What I didn't expect was that this accidental hit still somehow triggered a super critical strike. The vice captain buckled from the pain, his whole body seizing up. Then he let out a long wail toward the sky and collapsed face up on the ground, frothing at the mouth. The guild members around him froze on the spot. I felt a little bad. That super critical trigger was completely unintentional on my part, but the fight was over. The outcome was decided. I swept my gaze over the remaining guild members. In a low, measured tone, I told them that if they didn't want the same treatment, they'd better hand over the cobalt bird feathers right now. The group exchanged glances glances, and immediately agreed to cooperate. They asked me to hold on a moment and said they'd go get the cobalt bird feathers. But before anyone could move, a commotion broke out not far away. One of the men immediately shouted in that direction, pointing at me as he yelled, their vice captain had been taken down. On top of that, he flatly accused me of being a spy sent by a rival guild. The next second, more guild members came pouring in from every direction. I was surrounded on all sides in an instant. The one leading the charge was livid, raging that I had a lot of nerve going up against the hyena guild. Others fanned out searching, insisting there had to be more enemies. I couldn't have come alone. It was only then that they noticed the vice captain lying on the ground. They swarmed around him in shock. One person checked the vice captain's breathing and reported that he was completely unconscious. Another refused to believe the vice captain could lose to someone like me, insisting he must have gotten drunk again and slipped up. I rolled my eyes. He wasn't drunk. He was perfectly alert during our fight. While they were busy bickering, the hyena guild's captain made his entrance. He walked over at an unhurried pace, radiating authority. The rowdy underlings went quiet immediately, bowing and greeting their captain one by one. I sized him up, so this was the real ringleader of this outfit. The captain glanced over the bodies scattered across the ground, then said in a low voice that he'd heard someone had come looking for trouble. His underlings answered in unison. The captain's temper flared. Even the vice captain had been put down, he said. He demanded to know what happened. He looked around at the people on the ground, then finally turned to ask which guild I was with. I told him the truth. I worked alone. I hadn't joined any guild. The captain raised an eyebrow, not quite buying that I had taken down all these people by myself. I calmly nodded and confirmed it was entirely my doing. But then he suddenly laughed, said he liked what he saw. He went ahead and offered to have me join their guild. I blinked, thrown off by the sudden turn. When I didn't respond, the captain mistook my silence for speechless delight. He smiled and suggested we grab a few drinks to get better acquainted. Before the words were even out of his mouth, he stepped forward and threw his arm around my shoulder. My temper spiked instantly. I told him flatly to cut it out, and shoved him off sharply. I came here for cobalt bird feathers, nothing more. Joining a low-life outfit like this was out of the question. The captain's expression darkened the moment he heard low-life. He fixed me with a sharp look and asked if I was calling his guild low-life. I replied that they were exactly what I said, garbage thugs who picked on the weak. At that, the captain raised his axe and came at me. I sidestepped the blow fast, pulling out Centipede's edge and bracing for the fight at the same time. Where the axe landed, the ground was completely pulverized. The captain said coldly that he was withdrawing his invitation, said it was the first time anyone had ever dared look down on them like this. Then he declared he'd beat me to within an inch of my life and sell me into slavery. I thought it over quickly. That kind of devastating attack power, no way he was a rogue class. Before I could think further, the captain came at me again. I kept dodging fluidly with the help of God's speed, rolled to the side and landed steady, clearing his follow-up attack. I knew that if I let him activate a class skill, things would get a lot harder. I needed to put him down before he got that chance. I swung Centipede's edge and drove it toward him. The sudden counter clearly caught the captain off guard for just a moment. Before he could react, I slammed the flat of the blade into him with full force. I held back again on purpose. A direct hit with the edge would kill him, and I didn't want unnecessary deaths on my hands. But the captain could tell his movements had been anticipated by me, and when he realized I was holding back, all he felt was that I was disrespecting him. He looked furious, said it was time to get serious. He called out release, and the axe in his hand vanished into thin air. I watched his stance and guessed his class in an instant. Pugilist. A moment later, that guess was confirmed. A system notification appeared, close combat mode. Pugilist passive skill activated. Within 3 minutes of disarming, strength attribute doubled. The guild underlings watching nearby erupted into excited cheers, screaming their captain's name at the tops of their lungs. The captain, now with doubled strength, launched himself at me with his fists flying. I didn't take any chances. I dodged to the side immediately. His fist hit the wall beside me and punched a clean hole straight through it. A pugilist in close combat mode, taking a hit head-on would be catastrophic, but I had no intention of just running either. The moment he threw his next punch, I read the trajectory of his movement, found the perfect opening, and swung. Half a beat faster than his fist, the blade landed precisely on his weak point. A system notification rang out, critical hit confirmed. Active skill Eagle Eye triggered, damage doubled. The underlings around us were all left speechless, unable to believe what they were seeing. Their captain, the one they took such pride in, had been defeated just like that, crumpled and still. With their anchor gone, the underlings fell into chaos once more. At that moment, one of them suddenly recognized me from the crowd, crying out that I was the new adventurer from the news. He added that the report had clearly noted the distinguishing features: black hair, blue eyes. The others leaned in for a closer look and agreed I matched the description exactly. I had no interest in their chatter. I simply told them to hurry up and bring me the cobalt bird feathers. And the next second, the whole lot of them turned and sprinted away in blind panic, leaving their captain abandoned by the roadside, not even sparing a thought for the stolen goods. Whatever, not worth dealing with. Better to just go get the cobalt bird feathers myself and return everything else in the stash to the general store owner while I was at it. After that, I made my way to the B-rank dungeon, Giglun Waterfall. The dungeon's monsters were no challenge at all with my current gear and level. Before long, I had reached the depths of the dungeon and stood before the goddess statue. Looking at it now, I felt a swell of emotion. Felt like cracking open a drink to celebrate finally being reunited with this thing. All I had to do was unlock the mechanism of the fallen goddess statue, and the second piece of hidden equipment would be mine. I reached into my gear inventory and pulled out both the Cyclops' eye and the cobalt bird feather. Anyone sharp enough would probably notice at a glance that the statue's eye socket held some kind of mechanism. Some might even figure out that the missing left eye needed the Cyclops' eye fitted into it. But as far as I knew, no one had ever noticed the narrow gap along the wings behind the goddess, just wide enough to slide a single feather into. The moment I finished, the system displayed a notification. The fallen goddess statue's wish had been fulfilled. An instant later, the statue erupted in a blinding, brilliant light. Even tears seemed to flow, tracing slowly down the contours of the stone figure. As that scene played out, the second piece of hidden equipment appeared right on cue, floating in the air before the statue. The armor was called Lucifer's Halo, and its stats were nothing short of stunning. It came with a built-in luck bonus, practical skills like mind reading and mana sense, and a powerful third skill still waiting to be unlocked. Stats like these more than justified the demanding conditions required to obtain it. I accepted the equipment with genuine gratitude, murmuring a quiet thanks to the statue for the gift and its recognition. After a brief moment to settle my excitement, I equipped Lucifer's Halo without delay. The design was a little unusual, but for me, as long as it worked, that was enough. Now it was time to head to the S-rank dungeon and see what was waiting. Before long, I arrived at the S-rank dungeon area. The problem, though, was that Agni Volcano was considered high risk. Officially, entry was restricted to parties of 7 or more, and to make things worse, no one was currently recruiting members. S-rank dungeons had a special mechanic worth noting. Once the demon god inside was defeated, the dungeon would temporarily vanish and reappear at a random location elsewhere on the continent after some time, and taking down the first demon god was the only way to earn a title and gain access to the second continent. Getting to the second continent quickly was critical to moving forward with the plan to save my mother. Just as I was fretting over how to form a party, my eye caught a group not far away. I counted them, exactly 6 people. The female party leader had a look of deep worry etched across her face. Right then, the newly equipped Lucifer's Halo triggered its mind-reading skill. I picked up clearly on the party leader's thoughts. She desperately wanted to take on the S-rank dungeon, but had been stuck short one member. Talk about timing. Lucifer's Halo had barely been on my body and it was already proving its worth. While I was still thinking it over, I watched the party leader turn and say something quietly to her teammates. The members started gathering their belongings right after. By the looks of it, they were about to disband. I moved quickly and walked up to them, introducing myself and stating my purpose. Reading their reactions, I didn't even need mind reading to tell that they most likely saw me as a clueless rookie with more confidence than sense. A compounder in starter gear, volunteering to join an S-rank challenge team. Sure enough, one of the party members scowled and rejected my request on the spot. But mind reading picked up something in his heart. It wasn't malice. He was worried about a party member who'd been injured and hospitalized. So that was it. The reason they were short of 7 was a member who'd gotten hurt in an accident. I turned my attention to the party leader and asked her directly if there was something urgent pulling her to the S-rank dungeon. Mind reading told me she was worried about her father, an adventurer who had entered the S-rank dungeon over a month ago and still hadn't come back. The party leader didn't answer my question. She simply declined in a cool, detached tone. She said plainly that she didn't think I was a good fit for their S-rank run. Seeing that she was firm about it, I pressed her to tell me the specific reason. One of the older party members, a big uncle type, stepped in and said he was concerned about the thing on my head and whether there was something wrong with it. I realized then that in my haste, I'd forgotten to introduce myself, which was probably why they were suspicious. I quickly gave them a proper self-introduction. After hearing it, the party members immediately broke into hushed discussion. They said I looked weak, not the type to have taken down 33 enemies during the baptism ceremony. Whether I liked it or not, I had become a minor public figure, with my personal details already all over the place. It was at that point that mind reading gave me a window into the party leader's real thoughts. While she wasn't about to take news reports at face value, she could sense something quietly formidable in me, a nameless awe she couldn't quite explain. After a brief silence, the party leader finally nodded and agreed to let me join. They wouldn't be responsible for my safety, and if I turned out to be dead weight, I'd be left behind without hesitation. I agreed without a moment's hesitation. With the party arrangement settled, we set off immediately. Before long, we arrived at the S-rank dungeon, Agni Volcano. The party leader was sharp about it. She put me at the front right away, handing me the most dangerous position. I overheard the uncle muttering to the party leader under his breath, still fretting that I wasn't reliable. She told him not to worry. If I was useful, great. If not, he could just shove me forward as bait when things got dangerous. At that point, the red-haired guy sidled up and asked if I was the person mentioned in the news. I told him straight, I don't follow the news. But probably, yeah. Lucifer's Halo's mind reading showed that Red didn't believe me at all. The uncle scoffed nearby, saying it was definitely not me. I looked too weak, and wearing some weird halo on my head made me look completely unreliable. I thought to myself, this is high-performance equipment. They have no idea what they're dismissing. Suddenly, Lucifer's Halo's second skill, mana sense, activated. I immediately picked up on a massive, suspicious surge of magical energy moving in our direction. Hostile creatures near the summit were moving down the mountain in large numbers. I warned the party immediately that the volcano was about to erupt and told the uncle with the shield to activate his skill and protect everyone now. But the uncle pushed back flat out, saying I had no right to give him orders. His words weren't even finished when the ground beneath us began to shake violently. Agni volcano erupted in an instant. The uncle's earlier defiance froze on his face. He looked flustered for just a second. Scalding rock fragments were already screaming toward us from above. With the danger right in front of him, the uncle hurriedly activated his reflective guard skill, but there were far too many fragments. They rained down like a hailstorm. There was no moving forward until the eruption subsided. That was when the party leader stepped up. She signaled everyone to hold their positions, then raised her hand and began chanting. An enormous magic circle spread open beneath her, and from it, a massive fireball rose into the sky and surged straight upward, melting every incoming chunk of rock into lava in an instant. I was quietly impressed. A fire mage of this caliber, using high-tier magic to evaporate an entire rockfall just like that. But before anyone could fully exhale, the ground below us suddenly cracked violently open. In the fierce trembling, Red lost his footing and plunged into the gap. I threw my hand out and caught his wrist. I was just silently relieved that nothing worse had happened. When the rocks beneath me gave way with a thunderous collapse, I lost all footing in an instant and fell with Red into the pitch-black crevice below. We both braced for the worst. Then something bounced us mid-fall, cushioning the impact. Taking a closer look, we'd landed on a cotton bat. Maybe the luck bonus from Lucifer's halo had kicked in at just the right moment. I took a quick glance at the cotton bat beneath us and immediately urged Red to jump off. I explained to him that cotton bats absorb the impact of a fall and then release it back out, multiplied as a counterattack. Our fall had already been absorbed into its body. The rebound was coming at any moment. Brace yourself. Red went pale and said he understood. Before the words were out of his mouth, the cotton bat launched its attack. I leapt off immediately, grabbing Red's arm at the same time and throwing him toward a relatively safer stretch of rocky ground to the side. Forget it, I'd handle this one myself. I told Red to stay put and not move. This was the hunting grounds of an S-rank dungeon, and even a regular enemy packed this kind of destruction. If I hadn't thrown Red clear in time, he'd have been pulverized against the rock wall right along with it. The cotton bat saw me step in front of it and launched its attack immediately. I brought Centipede's edge up and cut it down in a single strike. Red's eyes went wide. He couldn't believe I'd taken out the cotton bat in one hit. Up above the crevice, the party leader activated her life sense skill. The skill's light spread quietly outward and quickly reached all the way to the bottom of the gap. She focused for a moment, her expression shifting from tense to relieved. The uncle beside her anxiously asked whether the two who fell were all right. The party leader turned and told the group, Red and I were safe for now. No one had expected that I'd fall in after Red just to save him. Even less expected was that I had detected the signs of the volcanic eruption before anyone else in the group. One of the party members suggested going down to find us. The party leader turned it down. Searching for us now would burn stamina they needed before the demon god fight. Their goal was to defeat the demon god and bring peace to the continent, even if just for a time. The summit was everyone's destination. They'd link up again along the way. She added that no one needed to worry about Red. He was capable. After all, she was the one who trained him. Hearing all of this from below, I realized the party leader was Red's actual older sister. I turned to Red and said simply, let's move. But Red saw me heading toward the bottom of the volcano and blinked, quickly pointing out that the demon god was at the summit. I glanced at him and said my level was too low right now. Rushing the demon god would just be throwing my life away. The plan was to go down to the smaller hunting grounds below and grind for levels. I could sense the conflict in him, and underneath it, an intense drive to get stronger. So I offered if he wanted to get stronger too, he was welcome to come along. Red followed me down and froze the moment he saw what was in front of him. The area ahead was packed wall to wall with fire-boned chickens, most of them in the level 41 to 42 range. He sucked in a sharp breath, muttering that they were even higher level than the cotton bat, but I'd already charged in, moving with clean efficiency, like chopping vegetables, and knocked down several in quick succession. Red stared, completely stunned, murmuring that I was unreal. Just then, one of the firebone chickens lunged at him. Red reacted fast enough and dodged to the side, but his footing gave out and he stumbled down onto the ground. He couldn't get back up in time, so he pulled out his weapon to defend himself. But the firebone chicken took to the air, leaving him with no way to attack at close range. I called out to him from nearby. Ranged attack works too. Wait for it to dive, then shoot it down on the approach. Red immediately did exactly that, and brought the firebone chicken down with a clean shot. He let out a breath, saying he wasn't going to lose a one-on-one. After finishing off the rest, Red turned to ask how things were on my end, and stopped cold. I was already sitting off to the side, eating roasted meat. Hearing Red's voice, I looked up at him, casually grabbed a piece and held it out, telling him it tasted just like fried chicken, not bad. Right after saying that, I let out a burp. I'd eaten way too much, and my stomach was uncomfortably bloated, but I needed to stack 50 layers of the buff before I'd be ready to take on the first demon god. Suddenly, I sensed an enormous surge of magical energy heading straight for us. I grimaced internally, of all the timing. A heartbeat later, a massive creature appeared in view. The dungeon boss of this hunting ground, the fire lizard. The system notified me that the bloating had put me in an abnormal status, all stats reduced by 30%. I quickly leaned against a nearby rock and threw up everything I'd just eaten. No time to recover. I spun around and warned Red to be careful. I told him this fire lizard was a cannibalistic mutant subspecies. Its stats were significantly higher than the standard variety. The moment I said it, the fire lizard whipped its thick tail straight at Red. Red jumped to the side in time, but still caught the edge of the tail sweep and stumbled back a few steps. I told him in a low voice to find cover, fast. This fire lizard was mine to deal with for now. I studied the fire lizard in front of me and asked, why was it moving so sluggishly? Could it be that it had also eaten too much and was suffering from the same bloating I was? From the way it looked, it seemed like it was about to throw up. Sure enough, the next second, the fire lizard opened its massive jaws wide and retched a pile of foul-smelling filth onto the ground. It was mixed with all kinds of things, and in it, I spotted human bones. Red saw what was in the mess and went completely still. I was still half joking with the fire lizard, said we should settle this before either of us threw up again. Then Red suddenly dropped to his knees. He said those were his father's sword and clothes. His eyes burned red with rage. The next second, Red shot to his feet and charged at the fire lizard without a second thought. I called out trying to stop him, but he'd lost himself to the need for revenge. The fire lizard didn't care. It swung its tail again and knocked Red flat on the ground just as easily. Red hauled himself back up, still screaming that he was going to kill it. Seeing how out of control he was, I stepped forward quickly and shoved him down onto the ground. Then I snapped at him sharply, told him to stop right now. Red thrashed and yelled at me to get out of his way. I told him flat out that going in like this was a death sentence, but Red wasn't listening. Common sense wasn't reaching him. All he wanted was to charge back in. I raised my voice and asked him straight, had he thought about what would happen to his sister if he died? That one sentence hit him like a bucket of cold water. He went quiet immediately, and the struggling stopped. I eased my tone and told him he knew as well as I did, this fire lizard wasn't something either of us could handle alone. Through mind reading, I could feel his anger clearly. Beneath it was mostly frustration at his own helplessness. I let go of him and apologized for snapping at him without warning. Then I suggested we take it down together. I asked if he was a hunter class, whether he had the battle cry skill, and what he had in his inventory. Red steadied his breathing and said he had recovery potions, arrows, and somehow a clump of cotton bat fluff. I told him that was a bonus from a hunter's hidden trait. He'd just stumbled onto something useful. I told him I had one last trick up my sleeve, and he needed to follow the steps I gave him exactly. Red was full of doubt. He couldn't believe the two of us could take down the fire lizard. I told him that if he wanted revenge, he had to trust me without question. Asked him if he was willing to bet on it. Red looked at the fire lizard, the thing that had killed his father. He gave a firm nod, telling me to call the shots. I laid out the full plan for him. Step 1, I needed him to buff me first. Red nodded and immediately began chanting the hunter class skill. A system notification appeared. Red's class skill battle cry was in effect. I had entered an activated state for 5 minutes. Strength and agility both up by 30%. Battle cry offset the bloating debuff exactly. Now all that was left was to execute the plan. Red then pulled the clump of cotton bat fluff from his inventory. I thanked him, took the fluff, and tucked it into my own inventory for now. Then I gripped my short sword tight and charged at the fire lizard. The fire lizard saw me coming in head first and immediately tensed up, dropping into a combat stance. Without hesitation, I swung Centipede's edge and drove it deep into the fire lizard's thick hide. A system notification confirmed the fire lizard subspecies had entered a lethal poison state. I immediately signaled Red to start firing. Red's arrow came in a heartbeat later, driving straight into the vital point on the fire lizard's head. That, I thought, was a big help. The fire lizard's weak point was right between the brows, nearly impossible to hit accurately at close range. I motioned for him to keep the pace up. Red drew back and knocked another arrow immediately, lining up the shot. As the arrow came whistling in, I twisted aside, pulling the fire lizard's attention with me. The arrow landed clean between the fire lizard's brows. After taking consecutive hits, the fire lizard was starting to lose its footing. I saw the state it was in and thought we had it. Then a system notification suddenly popped. Fire lizard subspecies has entered enraged mode. All stats increased by 30%. Red's expression dropped. He urgently asked what we were supposed to do now that things had taken a turn. Sure enough, the fire lizard's entire body was engulfed in roaring flames, and it was bearing down on us. I calmly told Red not to worry. I had a plan B ready. In enraged mode, the fire lizard's stats across the board would spike sharply. A tough spot, but also exactly what we needed to turn this around. I grabbed the cotton bat fluff and announced that plan B was in motion. All Red needed to do was follow my lead. In enraged mode, the fire lizard's weak point had shifted. Before, it was between the brows. Now it was the front legs. Red understood instantly. His arrow struck the fire lizard's front leg with precision. At the same moment, I swung hard at the weak point and activated Eagle Eye, doubling the damage. Under our coordinated assault, the fire lizard's momentum visibly broke down. It was even starting to lose its footing. But this level of punishment still wasn't enough to finish it off entirely. This was just the signal that it was approaching near near death. I knew all too well, this thing could still draw from the surrounding flames to regenerate. Sure enough, the very next second, a system notification appeared. The fire lizard subspecies was entering self-regeneration mode to recover HP. If the fire lizard managed to complete its regeneration, there was no way we could put it down before Battlecry's 5-minute window ran out. I steadied my focus and signaled Red to land the finishing blow. The weak point right now was the mouth. I'd handle baiting it open, his job was to shoot. Red drew the bowstring to full tension immediately, ready to fire at any moment. Then I charged straight at the fire lizard, one clear goal in mind: force it to open its mouth. I swung and slammed the sword hard into the fire lizard's lower jaw. The impact hit home. The fire lizard's jaws snapped wide open in pain. That was the moment I threw the cotton bat fluff forward with a quick toss and caught Red's eye, signaling the shot. Red immediately lined up along the trajectory of the fluff heading into the fire lizard's mouth, poured every ounce of strength into the bowstring, held his breath, and released. The arrow found the cotton bat fluff dead on, and with its own momentum, drove both arrow and fluff clean into the fire lizard's mouth. The fire lizard had no time to react, it swallowed them on reflex. The whole area went dead silent for a beat. Worry crossed Red's face. He was afraid it had failed again. I told him to watch, then began counting down in a low, steady voice. 3, 2, 1. The moment I finished, a massive explosion detonated from inside the fire lizard, blowing it apart completely. The cotton bat fluff, it turned out, has a hidden effect, absorbing an attack and releasing it back at 3 times the force. That was the key to this whole plan. Right then, the system chime rang out. Battlecry's effect had ended at exactly the last moment of its duration. Immediately after, another notification: 5 minutes of physical activity had cleared my bloating debuff. The fire lizard's remains crashed heavily to the ground. The system confirmed the target had been defeated, and the experience reward came in. The hunt was officially over. The two of us headed back to the surface and pressed on toward the summit. Red walked with his head down the entire way, clearly in a dark place, but my mind-reading skill had temporarily expired. I couldn't sense his thoughts anymore. Before long, the party leader and the others came into view ahead. The party leader spotted Red, and immediately walked over to look him over closely. Her eyes fell quickly on the sword in Red's hand. Red told her in a hoarse voice that their father's belongings had come out of the fire lizard's stomach. The party leader's eyes turned red instantly. She stepped forward and pulled Red into a tight embrace, quietly murmuring words of comfort. The others around them spoke up too, telling Red he'd been through a lot. Red shook his head and gave me the credit. The party leader followed Red's gaze and turned to look at me, only to find me kneeling on the ground. A few party members whispered among themselves nearby. I didn't pay it any mind. Even without mind reading right now, I knew there was something I could do. That was to stack some stones into a simple grave marker. When the others saw what I was doing, they came over to help. The party leader and Red looked on, and the gratitude on both their faces was clear. In front of the grave we'd built together, everyone in the group knelt down side by side and prayed in silence for the departed to rest in peace. Watching the sister and brother kneeling shoulder to shoulder, my thoughts drifted somewhere far away without meaning to. When I was little, my sister and I were playing at home, when my mother suddenly came rushing in, crying, telling us our father was gone. The next second, the party leader's voice pulled me back. She bowed to me deeply and said she owed me a thanks for more than one thing. I waved it off and told her I hadn't really done anything worth thanking. Red making it out alive came down to his own strength in the end. Red pushed back firmly, saying he wasn't too dense to know how things actually stood. Whether it was defeating the fire lizard or him coming out of it alive, all of it was because of me. He added that my strength was far beyond what the rumors had made it out to be. The uncle who doubted me earlier paused, then asked Red if I was really as impressive as he was saying. I cut in right there and told them to stop fussing over me. The more important thing was that the one behind all of this was sitting on top of that mountain. We needed to reach the summit as quickly as possible and take down the first demon god. The party leader's eyes turned fierce in an instant. Through gritted teeth, she said she'd reduce it to ashes. The group regrouped and set out again, pushing toward the summit. All the way up, we fought through everything in our path, taking down every creature that came at us along the route. Everyone's strength kept growing with every fight. Finally, we reached the summit of Agni Volcano. One of the party members looked around and asked where the demon god was. The words were barely out before the entire summit began to shake. The volcano erupted again, and scorching lava poured freely down the mountainside. They stared at the massive shape slowly emerging before them, every one of them stunned into silence. A system notification popped: First Demon God, level 50. Special trait, Scorching Heatwave. To me though, it was just a dumb 3-headed dog with one oversized body. The first demon god opened its enormous mouths and let out a thunderous roar. Everyone instinctively clamped their hands over their ears. The uncle muttered that the sound alone was overwhelming. The party leader's expression was grim. A pressure this intense, she said, was going to be a serious fight. The demon god laughed mockingly and asked if this bunch of humans had come to die. I immediately shouted for everyone to fall back. Its first move would be a breath attack. Guaranteed. The party leader reacted fast and ordered everyone to follow my signal at once. Everyone pulled back quickly, but the party leader noticed I was still standing right where I'd been. She called out, asking what I was doing and telling me to move. I gave a slight smile. I appeared not to have reacted in time. The demon god had already unleashed a torrent of blazing fire, and the flames engulfed me completely. The party members who'd retreated to safety were still caught by the scorching heat wave and took damage. Red shouted my name in a panic. The demon god gloated that I was an idiot. At thousands of degrees, it said, there wouldn't even be ash left. One party member asked in a deflated inflated tone if I was really dead just like that. The siblings were both locked onto the spot where the flames had swallowed me. Neither of them could find their voice. Then the demon god's expression suddenly shifted to shock, because within those roaring flames, my silhouette was slowly becoming visible. I casually brushed off the dust that wasn't there, and remarked that it didn't feel that hot, honestly. The demon god studied me for a moment, then said with an amused tone that I was interesting for a human. Red saw I was unharmed and leapt with joy. The party leader stared, completely baffled as to how I had survived that lethal breath attack. I thought to myself, all that force-feeding of firebone chicken like a complete idiot had been for exactly this moment. By the rules of this world, eating 50 servings of firebone chicken meat grants 7 minutes of fire resistance. The skill doesn't negate damage entirely though. My HP had still taken a hit. The system flagged my status as near death, which also triggered Godspeed. The demon god couldn't hide its excitement. It said it had finally found a human worth fighting. Time to have a real battle. The moment it said that, it activated a skill. A system notification confirmed the demon god's special trait, Scorching Heat Wave, had activated. Everyone present was inflicted with the burn status. HP started draining continuously. The party leader made the call without hesitation and ordered another full retreat. Everyone scrambled behind the nearby rocks for cover. Red hid behind a rock, frustrated and powerless, watching the battle play out in front of him. Meanwhile, I was standing straight into the heat, shouting at the demon god and asking if it was done warming up. My provocation immediately set it off. It said I seemed different from the other humans, but warned me not to get overconfident just because I could handle a little heat. It was going to teach me that arrogance without ability was nothing but reckless bravado. The moment it finished speaking, it plunged straight into the lava beneath its feet. Everyone hiding behind the rocks panicked, with no way to predict where its next attack would come from. I gripped my weapon and dropped into a sharp combat stance. I knew well that of all the attack patterns this creature had, the one that needed the most watching was the aerial ambush. I settled my mind and waited patiently. The demon god burst from the lava in a surging lunge, massive claws driving straight at my face, only for me to deflect it without much effort. The uncle hiding at a distance let out a stunned cry. Even the shockwave from that attack had reached this far. The party leader was equally taken aback that I could hold off the demon god's full force assault. The first demon god itself was more unsettled than anyone. It said I was starting to interest it. It leapt into the air again and announced it would spend some time playing with me just to pass the time. Then it sank back into the lava. From beneath the lava, the demon god's voice called out, asking whether I could handle its next attack. The party leader immediately tensed and shouted that this was bad. Red frantically called out for me to get behind the rocks. Now, then he called out again, only to realize I had closed my eyes. At that moment, the demon god suddenly burst from behind the very rocks where everyone was hiding, and launched a direct ambush at my back. The group cried out in alarm, everyone certain there was no way I could avoid this one. But I simply turned to the side, and the killing blow slipped past me by a clean margin. Everyone was left speechless. The demon god's face twisted into an expression of pure disbelief. This was what that oddly shaped piece of equipment on my head could do. I could sense the magical presence of every living creature within 5 kilometers. The demon god said with a grudging respect that my instincts weren't bad. I raised an eyebrow and replied that it wasn't instinct. I had a complete read on its every move. The demon god scoffed and said I'd just gotten lucky. Told me not to flatter myself. It sank into the lava again, saying that luck wouldn't hold forever, and that even if I could keep dodging, I clearly had no room left to fight back. I rolled my eyes internally and muttered, how many more rounds of whack-a-mole did this need to be? Less talking, more attacking. I turned it over quietly in my mind. As long as I used mana sense to pin its exact position and worked with Godspeed, I could catch the right moment to strike back. Something about this felt familiar. I'd run through a scenario like this many times in a past life. Then suddenly, the demon god burst out from directly beneath a nearby rock. Red shouted that it was right below me, but the next second, the demon god froze and found that I had already vanished from where I'd been standing. Everyone looked up. I was already airborne. I brought my weapon swinging downward, in a clean vertical cut straight at the demon god. The sudden counter caught the demon god completely off guard. I paused with my weapon raised and gave it a casual greeting, asking who it was that just said I had no room to fight back. Red watched me land the ambush hit, stunned and thrilled at the same time, but knowing he didn't even have what it took to fight alongside me in a battle like this. A moment later, the demon god steadied itself and roared. One hit meant nothing, and I shouldn't get too smug. Some lowly human wasn't going to get in the way of its mission. That line gave me a moment's pause. That particular line had never appeared anywhere in the game story I remembered. Before I could think any further, the demon god had already sunk back into the lava. Whatever. Digging into that now was pointless. Focus on the fight. Before long, the demon god surged out of the lava again. I swung without hesitation. The system confirmed a critical hit. Eagle Eye triggered, damage doubled. The demon god now believed it. I wasn't relying on instinct. I genuinely had its attack patterns mapped out completely. A follow-up notification, lethal poison activated. The demon god had entered a poisoned state. The demon god snarled that I'd resorted to poison, cheap tactics. I gave a short laugh. The fact that it had no poison resistance was common knowledge to every adventurer who came here. Striking at a weakness wasn't dirty. That's what fighting was supposed to be. From his spot in the distance, the uncle finally dropped all remaining doubt and acknowledged my strength. The party leader felt the same way. Plenty Plenty of capable teams had been buried here, yet I was holding my own against the demon god alone. But I wasn't stopping to soak in anyone's reaction. I went at the demon god again, telling it that if it kept failing to hit me, the poison would finish it off in 5 minutes and send it straight to hell. Those words pushed the demon god over the edge. It unleashed a fire skill stronger than anything it had used before. The party leader sensed the change immediately and urgently warned everyone the burn damage had intensified. She ordered the whole group to retreat to a safer distance at once. Red's frustration kept building. Watching me move through the battlefield without breaking a sweat only made his own helplessness sting more. Then once again, the demon god saw me come out unscathed and absolutely lost its composure. It activated the breath attack again. I blinked. According to the game, that skill was only supposed to be used once. Its attack patterns were different from what I remembered. Fortunately, the 7 minutes hadn't run out yet. If they had, that hit would have killed me outright. The demon god stared at me and said it had figured out from the start that I was using some ability to track the flow of magical energy. I told it flatly that so what? Was it already working on an excuse for when it lost? The demon god let out a cold snort. It declared that even if I could predict its position, there was absolutely no way I could cut down all 3 of them at once. That made something drop in my chest, a feeling that something was wrong. The next second, the demon god's body split into 3. I thought this was not in the game at all. The 3 split demon gods launched into the air almost simultaneously and plunged into the lava beneath them together. Even knowing where each attack would come from, defending against strikes from every direction at once was a different problem entirely. All 3 demon gods let out a synchronized roar, declaring that I was the one heading to hell first. And because I needed to maintain god speed, I was still in near-death status. One hit from any of them, and it was over. But that was exactly why a showdown at the edge of everything like this got the blood pumping. The demon gods jeered with excitement, saying they hadn't had an opponent this entertaining in a long time. Then they declared I could go ahead and die. Shortly after, they'd make sure my useless companions followed me. It would all end here. With that, the 3 demon gods burst from the lava simultaneously. One of them came straight at me from behind. At that critical moment, the party leader stepped in. Her frost burst magic hit just in time. Then she appeared at my back. She called out to the first demon god with open contempt, asking which one of us was supposed to be useless. The demon god turned its fury on the party leader and roared that if she wanted to die, she'd get her wish. Just as it moved to redirect its charge toward her, I seized that brief gap, swung and drove the blade straight at its skull. One head was severed on the spot, and it hit the ground hard. The party leader looked at me and said that made them even. I gave a small nod. My eyes fell on the remains of the demon god's severed right body, my mind already moving through the next stage of the fight. 2 demon gods left. The party leader being here was at least something to work with. There was always a way, and I had full confidence I could finish them both off. Using the brief pause between attacks, I asked her if she could use ice-type magic. She said her main specialty was fire. Her ice magic was low-level, barely functional. I followed up, asking if her skills could still hold up a little longer. She said the burn had been cleared by a buff effect, but she probably didn't have much left. I nodded and told her 5 seconds would be enough. Before the words were finished, I moved instantly into position. At the same time, I told her to stay exactly where she was and not move. Then I activated Godspeed and launched into a sprint. I ran the numbers. The lethal poison I'd applied earlier had already eaten through a considerable chunk of their health. With that, 1 clean hit per target would be enough. A system notification confirmed Eagle Eye had triggered. In one fluid motion, I cut down the demon god's left body. No time to breathe. I turned immediately. The last remaining demon god had already sunk back into the lava. I turned and told the party leader to get to cover while she could. I'd handle the rest alone. She said she'd finish what she could do first before stepping back. Then she began chanting, "Solar Blaze." A system notification. Solar Blaze's effect would boost my attack power and further raise my fire resistance for 3 minutes. The party leader explained that while this buff was active, the casting restriction meant she couldn't use any more magic. It was all she could do. She wouldn't get in my way after this. I smiled and said, "Thank you, Fire Mage." With this buff in hand, wrapping up the last one would be quick. Down in the lava, the remaining demon god was seething. No matter how it turned it over, it couldn't accept that beings of their standing as high-tier demon gods had been brought down by mere humans. It made a silent vow. Once it recovered its strength, it would tear every single one of them apart. The next second, I appeared in front of it without warning. The demon god was stunned. This was the lava's high-temperature core zone. How had a human gotten in here, let alone survived it? I held up a hand and told it that kind of line had worn out its welcome. Time to send it to hell. For real this time. Before I even finished the sentence, I raised my sword and drove it into the demon god's weak point, ending it in a single slash. The moment the demon god fell, the entire lava zone began to rumble and groan. Everyone sheltering in the safe zone held their breath, every single one of them silently hoping that the person who came walking out of the lava would be me. When the lava stopped churning, I climbed out. Red came charging over, overwhelmed with relief, urgently asking if I was hurt anywhere. He pushed a recovery potion at me while asking whether the demon god had been defeated. I smiled and nodded. The demon god had been successfully taken down. Red immediately spun around and called out to his sister. The party leader's eyes filled with tears. She said now, at least, their father might find some peace. Right then, the official system notification sounded, confirming the demon god had been defeated. and distributing the experience and rewards to everyone accordingly. I checked the reward amount, 800,000 gold. I thought, sending this home would give my mother and sister quite the shock. On top of that, there were rare items like steel hooks and great fangs, but unfortunately none of the specific materials I was looking for. The party leader walked over and said she didn't even know where to begin thanking me. Red agreed, saying there was no way any of them would have defeated the demon god without me. The uncle beside them couldn't hold it in either. He said I was genuinely something, and added his own thanks. I waved it all off and told them the demon god going down wasn't only because of me. The party leader protested. Being recognized for their level of contribution made her feel embarrassed. I reassured her right away she had every right to that reward. The last buff she cast had made a real difference. The party leader thought for a moment, then said she wished she had something to give me as a thanks, but the rarest item she'd gotten in her rewards was just a scorching rock. The moment I heard that, my eyes lit up. I stepped forward with barely contained excitement and told her that scorching rock was exactly what I needed. I asked if she'd be willing to trade it for the steel hooks I'd gotten. The party leader blinked, then explained that steel hooks were top-tier materials for this entire continent. I knew that, of course, but for me, the scorching rock was the one that mattered. She laughed and said she'd give me the scorching rock as a gift. She pulled it from her inventory and placed it in my hands. I tucked the material I'd been waiting for into my inventory. Through Lucifer's halo, I picked up a faint shift in emotion. The party leader had developed a quiet admiration for me, and on the other side, the uncle harbored an intense affection for the party leader and a sharp jealousy toward me. I thought to myself, this was going to be a lot of trouble. Now that I had the scorching rock, the smart move was to get out of here fast. Back on the main street of the first continent, I suggested to the group that we go our separate ways here. The party leader responded that her father's affairs still needed to be seen to. They'd be heading back to their hometown first. She hoped our paths would cross again when the time was right. Red made a serious declaration. He would train hard and grow stronger, and one day he would catch up to me. Looking back on everything, even with my past life game memories to lean on, I was genuinely grateful to have crossed paths and traveled with these people. I gave a quiet response and raised a hand in farewell. The money transfer home had already gone through. Next up was the journey to the second continent. I arrived at the transfer gate. Nearby adventurers were murmuring. I was still wearing the compounder's starter gear, and I didn't look like someone who had defeated a demon god. Then the system confirmed I held the title of First Demon God Slayer and asked if I wished to proceed to the second continent. I tapped yes and stepped into the warp gate. The adventurers who'd just been whispering about me erupted in disbelief, saying you really couldn't judge by appearances. In an instant, I arrived at the main street of the second continent. No sooner had I found my footing than the system chimed again. My sister was trying to reach me. After I picked up, she anxiously asked where I was, saying a huge sum of money had suddenly arrived and she wanted to know what was going on. She kept pressing. What kind of work was I doing? Was it something sketchy? I sighed quietly to myself. I'd kept my adventurer career a secret from both my sister and my mother, not wanting them to worry. I quickly reassured her, told her not to worry, it was legitimate work, and the money was just an unexpected windfall. Then my sister's voice went quiet. She told me our mother hadn't been doing well lately. After the call ended, I sat down on a bench along the roadside. The lightness I'd felt moments ago was gone. I made a quiet decision. There was no more time to take things step by step at a measured pace. Getting my mother proper treatment meant making money, and making it fast. While I was thinking through what to do next, a conversation between two passersby caught my ear. They were talking about an upcoming special auction, and mentioned tiers of a high-tier fairy, estimating the closing price would break 100 million. I immediately pulled up the event information, looked through the auction catalog in detail. Tiers of a high-tier fairy, the base ingredient for a cure-all medicine capable of treating any disease. If I could get my hands on it, there was a real chance my mother could recover completely. Raising enough funds was the clear priority now. With that goal in mind, I made my way to an E-rank dungeon on the second continent. Normally you'd want a higher-tier dungeon for money, but this place had a specific item that made it the fastest way to earn. I hadn't been inside long before a rustling sound closed in around me. After a soft little cry, a nekomata appeared. My heart jumped. I immediately pulled out items I'd gathered ahead of time on the way here, gave them a gentle shake, and coaxed the nekomata closer in a soft, friendly voice. I laid out tundra yams, warm wheat, and frozen fish. All of it for you. On top of that, I'd prepared a warm, fluffy bed made from wormweed. The nekomata looked over the items and the bed carefully and seemed more than pleased. It reached into itself and produced a gold coin, offering it as a trade. This wasn't any ordinary coin. It was a fortune item that doubled all bounty earnings. I couldn't hide my delight and thanked the nekomata immediately. Almost no one knew how to obtain this hidden fortune item, but the method was surprisingly simple. With this, earning money from here on would be straightforward. No time to waste. I set out immediately to take down monsters and build up funds. Along the way, I cleared out every creature that showed up and took down the dungeon boss while I was at it. After fighting through it all, the startup funds I needed had been gathered. With that, I took the money back to the streets to make it grow. I walked into the underground casino tucked deep in the back alleys. Against people driven purely by greed, I had no reason to hold back. The moment I stepped inside, A bald man with a thick beard was loudly boasting about his winnings. I picked up a feeling of dishonesty and quickly sensed that this man had raked in over 10 million through underhanded means. Just as I suspected, there were cheats operating in here. Looking at the mountain of chips in front of him, I decided on the spot he was my target. As it happened, the bearded bald man also noticed me at that moment and raised an eyebrow asking if I wanted a round. I nodded and put on a modest, slightly nervous smile, saying it was my first time and to please go easy on me. In truth, I'd spent plenty of time in casino-style scenes back in my past life game. I knew every rule and every trick inside out. The bearded bald man laughed and said the game was just pure number guessing, then generously offered to be the banker and match whatever I wanted to bet. At the same time, I noticed the dealer nearby making discreet, suspicious movements, clearly in on it together with the bearded bald man. The dealer cleared his throat and announced the game was starting. I was the player and should name a number and a wager. Without hesitation, I called out red 36 and black 8, then added, the bet is 10 million. Both the bearded bald man and the dealer went completely still. I feigned confusion, asking if they hadn't heard me and whether they needed me to repeat it. Then I reminded him to hurry. The ball on the roulette wheel was about to stop, and any player who hadn't called a number before it stopped was considered an automatic forfeit. What I'd worked out in my head was this: both sides couldn't pick the same number. By naming two different numbers at once, they had absolutely no way to cheat. After all, the dealer's class was Hunter, and he'd been using the Hunter skill Sniper's Eye, which locked onto the final resting number with 100% accuracy, but couldn't be changed once aimed. Thinking that, I watched the two of them with a calm smile. The bearded bald man panicked, whispering urgently at the dealer to signal him the number. The roulette ball was still spinning at full speed, and the crowd of onlookers held their breath. In the end, the ball settled firmly on red 36, the other pocket, black 8. I let out a quiet laugh and said it seemed my luck was holding today. Really, once you understood exactly how these people cheated, they didn't pose much of a challenge. The bearded bald man erupted in disbelief. He pointed at me, turning to the dealer and manager to accuse me of cheating. The manager came rushing over, looked me up and down, said something about my extraordinary luck, and invited me to step into the back room for a chat. I saw straight through him. This was not the atmosphere of anyone wanting to have a friendly chat. The manager was obviously in on it too. Sure enough, the manager immediately shot a look to his men behind him, signaling them to grab me. I responded by flipping the table clean over and telling him in a flat voice to watch himself. The first man who came at me was put down with a clean chop to the neck before he could get close. Completely still, an archer not far away immediately drew on me. The bearded bald man came charging in with a weapon too. Facing both at once, I sidestepped easily and put both the bearded bald man and the archer on the floor with two quick counter strikes. I pointed out coldly that the ones cheating in here were them. The manager's expression soured. He muttered under his breath about what was wrong with this kid. He was way better in a fight than expected. One of his men leaned in and quietly mentioned that my appearance matched the description of the new adventurer from the recent news. The manager's eyes sharpened. He realized I might be the one who had taken down the first demon god in an impossibly short time. The others around them joined in, confirming I was the person who'd shattered the record by defeating the first demon god. I had no patience for their chatter. I told them to come at me if they were going to, or get it over with. Then the manager suddenly dropped to his knees with a thud, groveling and apologizing. I read what was actually going through his mind. He decided he couldn't win and was planning to offer a token settlement to keep his losses as small as possible. I wasn't going to let him have it that easy. I laid out my terms, all the cash in this casino, and a formal invitation to the upcoming auction. I also made it clear that I'd already figured out every cheating method they used in here, and taking just this much as hush money was already being more than generous. I gave him my account details and warned him plainly, refuse, and I'd either bring the association's enforcement unit in or tear this place apart all over again. With everything I needed in hand, I made straight for the auction venue. No matter what it took, I was going to get those tears of a high-tier fairy and cure my mother. I quickly confirmed how much I was working with and walked into the auction hall to find a seat. Meanwhile, back at the underground casino, the manager was still on his knees, grinding his teeth and cursing me for being a devil. Just then, the branch director arrived. The manager immediately rushed over and laid out the whole story with plenty of exaggeration. The branch director heard every word and burned with fury. He marched off to the auction hall with the manager in tow, intent on making me pay. Completely unaware of any of this, I sat focused in the hall, listening to the host's opening remarks. I was quietly going over my calculations. Crafting the cure-all medicine to heal my mother required 3 items: tears of a high-tier fairy, frozen chimera fangs, and ancient red clay. The good news was that all 3 happened to be in the auction catalog. That saved me a considerable amount of effort. As my eyes continued down the list, I suddenly stopped. Azure Dragon Wine was on there too. My pulse quickened. With that, I could get my hands on the next piece of hidden equipment in the shortest time possible. The auction items were brought up one by one. The frozen chimera fangs came to the front quickly, and I immediately raised my hand and bid 1 million. I hadn't even finished speaking when someone called out 10 million. I turned toward the voice. It was the casino manager. He wore a smug grin on his face and fixed me with a pointed, provocative stare. I cursed internally. So what what he'd handed over earlier wasn't all his money after all. I pulled my thoughts together fast. By standard auction procedure, the tears of a high-tier fairy would almost certainly be the final item of the night. That was the key to saving my mother. I absolutely couldn't lose it. I needed to keep enough funds in reserve for that bid. The host quickly closed the sale. The frozen chimera fangs went to the Serpent Wind Guild for 10 million. A chill went through me. The Serpent Wind Guild? That was one of the largest guilds in the world. The underground casino was under their umbrella. Not far away, the branch director was pointing at me, confirming my identity with the manager beside him. The manager nodded repeatedly, laying it on thick about how awful I was. The branch director gave a cold order: block every one of my bids, leave me with nothing. At that moment, the host's voice rang out again. Next up was Ancient Red Clay. I bid 50 million, but the Serpent Wind Guild immediately countered. The host's voice shot up in surprise. 200 million. I felt a jolt. I knew they'd come after me, but 200 million? That was absurd. I activated mind reading right away and caught the full picture. They were going to interfere with every single bid I made just to get back at me. At this rate, if I lost the tears of a high-tier fairy too, I'd be in real trouble. Going up against a financially dominant major guild in a bidding war was reckless beyond reason. Wait, were these people just mindlessly countering everything I bid on? If so, this was actually solvable. The host announced again. The Serpent Wind Guild had claimed the Mermaid's Great Scale. Right after that, the blood-soaked butcher's cleaver fell into their hands without a contest. Then they went as far as opening 500 million to take the Azure Dragon wine as well. Murmurs from the crowd drifted to my ears. This auction had turned into a complete sweep. The manager broke into triumphant laughter, mocking me for thinking one person could ever go up against a major guild. He told me to just watch as every item I wanted slipped through my fingers. I gave a cold laugh to myself. He had no idea yet which one of us had actually walked into a trap. The host finally announced that the last item of the night was coming up, hailed as the most beautiful droplet in all the world, tears of a high-tier fairy. As the introduction ended, the opening bid was set at 50 million. Without a moment's hesitation, I called out 500 million. The hall erupted. Whispers spread through the crowd, saying that price was completely untouchable. I repeated to myself, this is the whole point of being here. This is the one item I will not give up, no matter what. Come and try to block me again if you dare. The manager's face went ash gray. Through gritted teeth, he said he'd double it. The host cried out, Serpent Wind Guild bids 1 billion. But then the host's tone shifted sharply. Wait, please hold on. The Serpent Wind Guild has triggered the bid restriction and cannot continue placing bids. Inwardly, I smiled. Serves them right. The host went on to explain, this auction had a clearly stated rule. Each buyer may win a maximum of 5 items. The Serpent Wind Guild had already reached that limit and was therefore disqualified from further bidding. The manager's face went blank with shock, then he erupted, screaming that he'd never heard of any such rule. I thought to myself, this auction was a special certified event sanctioned by the association. It was a hidden element from the game, and it had carried a rule against monopolizing rare items from the very beginning. One look at a catalog full of nothing but ultra-rare items, and they should have seen something was off. Clearly, this person had no idea what a special auction even was. What an amateur. The manager stood there raging and swearing in place. The branch director's expression had gone thoroughly dark. The host ignored the commotion entirely and called out the end of the countdown. Congratulations, the tears of a high-tier fairy had been awarded to me for 500 million. The manager glared daggers at me. He demanded to know if I'd planned this all along, then told me to brace for what was coming. I stood up and replied coolly, this was a public place. If they wanted to fight, they could take it outside. No need to make a scene and drag innocent bystanders into it. I told him to take that in and drop the magic he had building around him. Truthfully, I wasn't confident at all, picking a fight here and now. With my current stats and level, the odds weren't in my favor. The branch director grabbed the worked-up manager and said evenly that I had a point. Making a scene in a place like this would only bring the association's attention down on them too. The manager struggled against his grip, insisting that letting me walk away like this would damage the guild's reputation. The branch director snapped at him not to make him say it twice, then turned and left. The auction ended. I sat in a corner going through my inventory, relieved to have secured the tears of a high-tier fairy. The other 2 ingredients for the cure-all had been taken, but those were items I could obtain in the dungeons ahead. The real loss was the Azure Dragon wine. That stung. The Azure Dragon wine, it was a rare item that could only be obtained by completing a particularly troublesome hidden quest on the 5th continent. If I'd gotten it now, I could have secured the next piece of hidden equipment in the shortest possible time. I was still quietly lamenting this when a white-haired girl suddenly appeared beside me and said my gear looked rare. She'd never seen a unique halo like that before. She quickly apologized for approaching out of nowhere, then asked what my connection to the Serpent Wind Guild was. I kept my guard up and asked who she was. I also clarified that I didn't know the long-haired man. I just had some bad history with them. The girl said she was an adventurer and that she'd taken on a commission from the association. She was looking into the Serpent Wind Guild for certain reasons. Something clicked. An association commission. This girl was one of the 8 stars. The 8 stars referred to the 8 S-rank adventurers officially recognized by the association, known for their strength, reputation, and wealth. The thought flickered through my mind with a hint of nostalgia. Back in the game, after clearing the main story, I'd taken association commissions myself, just to pass the time. I pulled myself back and mentioned that the Serpent Wind Guild people seemed to have already moved on. The white-haired girl said she should get going too, but could she ask one more thing before she left? I raised an eyebrow and told her to go ahead. Her gaze landed on my halo again, and she asked where I had gotten that piece of equipment. Something dropped in my chest. If the secret of the hidden equipment got out, it could draw unnecessary complications. Mind reading activated on its own. I sensed an intense fascination with my rare gear radiating from her, and the distinct feeling that she found the halo extremely cute and very much wanted it. I chose my words carefully and said explaining how to get this piece of equipment was a long story. The moment I said it, the atmosphere turned unbearably awkward. The white-haired girl suddenly shook her head, said never mind, and that she'd figure it out herself, then took her leave. Watching her go, I exhaled. If that equipment-obsessed girl had locked onto me from here, my journey ahead would have become a serious headache. And even from just that brief exchange, I could tell. That girl, even among the 8 stars, was likely somewhere near the top in terms of raw strength. Whatever. The priority now was gathering the remaining materials to craft the cure-all. I soon arrived at the A-rank dungeon on the 2nd continent, successfully took down the dungeon boss, a giant goblin, and as an unexpected bonus, it dropped an item called Goblin's Plunder Gauntlets. I checked my status. The leveling had gone smoothly too. I thought it through. Ideally, I'd take on the 2nd demon god as soon as possible to get the frozen chimera fangs. But before that, there was still another piece of hidden equipment I wanted first, and getting that hidden piece required the Azure Dragon Wine no matter what, which meant the only way was to take it back from the Serpent Wind Guild. Decision made, I immediately used Mana Sense to track them down and tailed them quietly looking for an opening. The white-haired girl from earlier was also nearby, still on the Serpent Wind Guild's trail, clearly. To make things more complicated, she picked up on my tailing pretty quickly, but she didn't try to stop me, so I carried on without concern and followed them into the Serpent Wind Guild's private hidden enclosure. Inside was an enormous field of forbidden herbs. I dropped all pretense of hiding, walked up, and gave the manager a light tap on the back. The manager turned on reflex, and the moment he saw my face, he froze. Then he demanded to know what I was doing here. The branch director looked over immediately, and his expression hardened instantly. I paid no attention to their anger. I plucked a bundle of forbidden herbs and laid out the secret that depending on how they were processed, these could be made into a magical narcotic. I went on to explain that magical narcotics caused auditory and visual hallucinations, and in severe cases could be fatal. The Adventurers Association had long since strictly prohibited their use and cultivation. Then I asked them plainly what they were really growing these for. The branch director's eyes went cold. He suspected I was someone sent by the association. I shook my head and said no. I was here for the Azure Dragon Wine they'd picked up at the auction. My terms were simple: hand over the Azure Dragon Wine, and I drop the whole matter, and pay a fair price for it on top. The manager's face went green with rage, and magical energy started surging around him. Before his response was even finished, he was already in front of my face. I told him evenly, this wasn't a threat, this was a normal negotiation. The manager scoffed and said that knowing I wanted the Azure Dragon Wine made him even less inclined to hand it over. I shrugged and said that if there was nothing to talk about, then there was nothing to talk about. I reminded them I didn't enjoy going to the authorities, but if word about this herb field reached the Adventurers Association, the consequences would not be something they could weather. That tipped the manager completely over the edge. He roared and came at me with his sword. I shifted slightly to the side, then came back with the hilt and knocked him clean to the ground. I smiled and said that was self-defense, then asked the branch director what he thought. From the shadows, the white-haired girl was quietly stunned by my ability, and even more curious about the short sword in my hand. It was a weapon she'd never seen before either. The branch director's eyes went ice cold. He called me an annoying fly daring to provoke them like this. He declared that he was furious right now, and if he killed me, I wouldn't even have the right to complain. I rolled my wrist out and said I was actually a little irritated too, having wasted so much time on this. From the shadows, the white-haired girl knew she should step in and stop this, but she decided to hold off a little longer and watch my weapon's performance. The next second, the branch director and I clashed. He swung a heavy longsword with overwhelming force. I met it with my short sword and blocked precisely. I was analyzing as I fought, while I had real combat ability. In pure strength, the branch director had the clear advantage. His level was visibly higher than mine too. Going toe-to-toe with him using nothing but standard attacks was a losing proposition. The only path to winning was to find a way to unlock the hidden equipment's third skill, and without tipping off the white-haired girl watching from the shadows. The branch director attacked and taunted at the same time, saying I was just a rookie. He asked if I was planning to fight to the death playing hero. I dodged and fired back. I wasn't planning to die, and I had absolutely no interest in being anyone's hero. I was moving toward my own goals. I wasn't going to back down here. The branch director said scornfully that a stray dog's defining trait was all bark and no bite. Howl all I wanted. I stopped engaging with his taunts and blocked his next heavy strike precisely. I absorbed the hit squarely, not a single step out of place. The branch director's brow furrowed. Something had felt off since earlier, he muttered. He'd been around for years and never seen such acrobatic, unpredictable skill movement. I said nothing back and slowly began gathering my energy. The next second, a system notification rang out in my mind. Skill 3 had been successfully unlocked. The unlock condition for Lucifer's Halo Skill 3 was maxing out the hidden stat, Mana Sense level. This hidden stat worked similarly to experience points. It rose and fell entirely based on the strength of opponents faced. To raise it quickly, I had to rely on mana sense during combat and dodge every single enemy attack with precision. The fight against the first demon god, combined with this intense clash against the branch director, the stat had hit its peak at this exact moment, meeting the unlock condition. By normal standards, unlocking skill 3 would take considerable time accumulating combat experience. Running into an opponent this strong here was a genuine stroke of luck. Then suddenly, the branch director's longsword drove into my back. He thought he'd landed it. His face lit up with satisfaction. He taunted me for not knowing there was always someone stronger out there. What he didn't know was that the thing he'd stabbed was only my afterimage. I materialized behind him in an instant and asked him which one of us didn't know there was always someone stronger. The branch director spun around in horror, completely unable to process the fact that I was still alive. I laughed and asked if he'd been daydreaming all by himself over there. He stared as the me he'd stabbed slowly dissolved away, and his composure shattered. He'd felt the resistance of the cut. How could there be no body? Before he could make sense of it, my short sword was already through his chest. The branch director's face was blank with disbelief. He couldn't make sense of any of it. He kept turning it over, trying to figure out what I had done to him, why he had the bizarre sensation of being struck again and again, and why he seemed to have absolutely no ability to resist any of it. At that moment, the white-haired girl stepped out from the shadows. She looked at the branch director struggling in pain, her expression full of confusion. I put my short sword away and offered no explanation of the skill's mechanics. I simply said the world was a large place, and there were far more unknown forces in it than most people realized. A system notification appeared again. Lucifer's Halo Skill 3's effect would last for 72 hours. Let the branch director sit and enjoy it. I turned to the white-haired girl and asked if tailing me had been fun. She was straightforward about it, but clarified that she hadn't been tailing me. The Serpent Wind Guild had been her target from the very beginning. I pointed at the herb field and said that an association commission would almost certainly involve tracking down illegal cultivation operations like this. She'd come away with quite a haul today. I said the rest was hers to handle. It had nothing to do with me from here. Just as I turned to leave, I smacked myself on the forehead, nearly forgot the whole reason I came. I quickly opened the item interface and selected the Goblin's Plunder Gauntlets. This item let me take one item from a defeated opponent's inventory. I walked up to the manager lying on the ground and activated Plunder without ceremony. Azure Dragon Wine, secured. This trip had absolutely been worth it. With this, I'd be able to clear the second demon god fight at maximum speed. I said quietly to myself, just wait a little longer, Mom. I'll have you healed soon. As I turned around, I found the white-haired girl leaning in to look at the item in my hand. I shifted uncomfortably and asked what she was doing, making a point to note that I was using a legitimate item. She shook her head and said she was just curious. No objections. I waved a hand and made a quick exit. The white-haired girl watched my back as I left, still turning over the fight in her head. She genuinely couldn't work out how I had won. No items used, no class skills activated. If it had been a prohibited piece of equipment, that would be a different matter, but mine wasn't on the association's restricted list. She'd never seen anything like it, which was exactly why the key detail escaped her. On my end, I arrived shortly after at the craftsman's workshop on the second continent. Just thinking about using the Azure Dragon Wine to unlock the next piece of hidden equipment put me in a good mood. Before I even reached the door, I heard someone outside cursing the craftsman for being a stubborn old fossil with no resemblance to the legendary master forger he was supposed to be. It seemed most people didn't know you had to bring a gift when you visited. Without one, the craftsman simply wouldn't hear a word anyone said. I pushed the door open with a smile and called out a greeting. The moment I did, two objects came flying at me and I quickly raised a plank to block them. Then the craftsman's short-tempered voice rang out immediately. He snarled that I was just another little brat here to cause trouble and told me to get lost. He'd never make equipment for brats. With that, he shoved me straight out the front door. I quickly held up the Azure Dragon Wine and told him to let me in. I had something good for him. That stopped the craftsman cold. Then he jumped forward and made a grab for the wine. I thought to myself, just as ornery as ever. In the game, if you handed over the wine at this point, the craftsman would get happily drunk and forge S-rank equipment for the player. But my target was something far rarer, a hidden item. With that in mind, I pulled out the Scorching Rock and asked if he'd like to share a drink. The moment the craftsman saw the Scorching Rock, his eyes went red. He invited me inside. We sat down at a table together. I picked up the flask and poured him a cup. He took a sip and murmured that his late wife had also loved wine warmed with Scorching Rock. It clicked into place. The Scorching Rock was indeed the key to triggering the hidden quest. I poured him another full cup, and just like that, the hidden quest route was underway. I'd assumed a brief exchange would move things along, but he kept talking and talking, growing more absorbed with every word. I ended up sitting there as his listener for the entire night and somewhere along the way drifted off to sleep without realizing it. When I opened my eyes again, daylight had come. The craftsman looked at me with bright, refreshed eyes. He thanked me for treating him to the finest drink he'd had in years. He said he wanted to give me a piece of equipment in return. True to his reputation as a legendary master forger, the third piece of hidden equipment was now mine. This armor allowed me to move freely through any terrain at full speed, along with a teleportation skill usable 5 times per day, warping me me to any point within 100 meters. With this, I'd be able to clear the second continent's S-rank dungeon at maximum speed. I thanked him earnestly and stood up to take my leave. Just as I reached the door, the craftsman called after me and tossed over a bottle, saying it was a parting gift. A system notification appeared. The craftsman had given me a non-alcoholic mulled wine with an effect that granted the extremely warm status upon drinking. The craftsman made a point of telling me, even as strong as I was, I should still watch myself out there. After saying my goodbyes, I arrived at the entrance to the second continent's S-rank dungeon. The area was blanketed in snow and ice year-round, howling winds, bone-cutting cold. I suddenly remembered the craftsman's non-alcoholic mulled wine would come in handy right now. I pulled out the bottle, opened it, and drank it down. A system notification confirmed my status had changed to extremely warm. The effect would last for 100 minutes. Thanks to that drink, even this thin set of clothes would be fine. Nearby adventurers were muttering that I was underestimating the extreme cold on the mountain, and suggesting I at least go buy some winter gear before heading in. A few others caught sight of the halo on my head, and quietly speculated that something might be wrong with me, their voices carrying a strange hint of pity. I had no time for any of that. I was mentally going over what mattered, the 2-hour time limit inside. Once the time ran out, I'd be forcibly transported back to the street, and everything I was carrying, items and money, would be cut in half as a harsh penalty. I thought back to when I was still new to this game. I'd gotten caught out in this dungeon plenty of times. Every time I got ejected, I'd have to start over, rebuild funds, upgrade gear, do it all again. Quite a few adventurers had already arrived before me and were pushing toward the demon god's city, but I'd get into the demon god's chamber faster than any of them and walk out with the frozen chimera fangs needed for the medicine. Two of the adventurers saw me brushing them off and moved ahead irritably. From the way they were moving, just advancing was a visible struggle. At their pace, the time limit would catch up with them fast. Then a level 82 snow rabbit appeared. The two were caught off guard and frantically raised their weapons to defend. While they scrambled to deal with the snow rabbit's assault, one of them happened to glance my way, and both of them froze, staring wide-eyed at me, leaping through the air at high speed. This was the passive skill that came with the hidden equipment the craftsman had made me. I could move freely through any terrain, unrestricted by the environment. Before long, a new obstacle appeared ahead. Two level 82 snow rabbits side by side blocking the path. I drew my short sword and cleared them both in a single clean strike. From behind, the two adventurers commented in disbelief that I was actually moving freely through the air. Then they speculated that I might be some kind of wandering ghost-type monster from the hunt. A heartbeat later, the two of them and the rabbit they'd been fighting actually joined hands in unison and said a small prayer for the slain gentle creatures. I kept moving and reached the city gate before long. From the entrance to the gate, 5 minutes flat, a solid pace. At this rate, I was on track to break the second demon god speed record. That thought had barely formed when I spotted a figure. The white-haired girl from the 8 stars was here too. My guard went up quietly. She'd been paying close attention to my hidden gear earlier, and I had no real desire to get tangled up with her. But thinking it through, this dungeon was already long cleared territory for her. She couldn't be here to fight the demon god. Then she simply raised her hand, and the city gate shattered instantly. I was genuinely stunned. The strength of the 8 stars really was something else entirely. She'd completely bypassed the gate's mechanism without a second thought. Nothing like that was possible in the game I used to play. By the standard route, you were supposed to solve a series of mechanism puzzles just to get through the gate. Now here she was, just shattering the barrier outright. I'd stumbled into unbelievable luck. I watched the white-haired girl walk straight into the city, then quietly touch down on the ground. I tried to get a sense of which floor she was heading to so I could move in the opposite direction as much as possible. While I was still thinking, at the gate, 4 snow rabbits suddenly appeared and surrounded me, launching their attack all at once. I immediately activated the Gale Shift skill. The snow rabbits all lunged at empty air. The next second, I was standing on floor 9 of the Demon God's city, the Extreme Ice Chamber. A system notification confirmed that 4 uses of Gale Shift remained. I quickly mapped out the route. To enter floor 10 and reach the Demon God's chamber, I first had to defeat the mid-boss of the Extreme Ice Chamber. That way I could face the second Demon God as quickly as possible and avoid crossing paths with the white-haired girl at the same time. Meanwhile, in the hidden ice chamber on the Annex's 7th floor, the criminal guild master of the Windblade Guild was lying low. To extend his time limit inside the dungeon, he had devised a brutal method. He was hunting down other adventurers. According to a forbidden rule he had uncovered, killing one adventurer extended his stay by 1 hour. So he had ordered his subordinates to deliver 24 adventurers to this location every day. Lately, however, fewer and fewer adventurers were making it to the Demon God's city. Even killing every last one who arrived wasn't enough to keep him hidden for a full day. His subordinates knelt on the floor begging for mercy and terror. He looked straight through them. He said coldly that their lives were each worth exactly 1 hour. Then he turned his anger on the subordinate in charge of delivering adventurers. If he couldn't round up 24 people next time either, he'd be killed to make up the count. That subordinate scrambled out of the room in blind panic. His only thought was survival, even if it meant leaving his companions to be sacrificed. But when he thought about the fact that the criminal guild master intended to hide here for several more months, a chill ran through him. How many more people would be slaughtered at this rate? Could he really hold on until the very end under this crushing weight? At that same moment, I was on floor 9 in the Extreme Ice Chamber, grinding monsters and leveling up. Thanks Thanks to the boots the craftsman had made, moving this freely in battle was genuinely exhilarating. But even through the excitement, I stayed alert to one thing: a massive surge of magical energy. It wasn't coming from the second demon god, it was coming from the annex's 7th floor, and the feeling it gave off was somehow more unsettling than the demon god itself. I weighed it up. The annex's energy was concerning, but the demon god had to come first. After defeating the demon god, if time and energy allowed, I'd investigate the annex. I soon finished off the current wave of monsters. Looking around, only 2 high-tier creatures remained in the extreme ice chamber. I sensed movement outside and immediately suppressed my presence, vanishing silently to the ceiling. Almost the very next second after I'd hidden, the room's door was pushed open. That was close. The white-haired girl had nearly found me. I held my breath and listened. Her voice, carrying a note of puzzlement, drifted through the room. She was wondering why there were no monsters here. Then, in the very next moment, the 2 high-tier creatures I'd been about to clear appeared. Both were level 92 frost colossi. The white-haired girl understood immediately that someone had swept through this room ahead of her. Without a moment's hesitation, she activated her summon skill. A wind spirit was called forth. Among summoners, spirit summoning was a class skill that required reaching a considerable level before it became available. The white-haired girl's gaze settled on the 2 frost colossi. She said in an even tone that she had no time to waste on them. The wind spirit moved in coordination with her skill. With a thunderous crash, both massive frost colossi shattered into ice fragments on the spot. 2 mid-boss level frost colossi, taken down in a single strike, on a completely different level from my own ability. I remembered, defeating every monster in the extreme ice chamber would make a staircase appear. Climbing it led directly to the second demon god's chamber, but the white-haired girl showed no intention of going up. Instead, she turned and prepared to leave, saying it looked like she'd have to search every corner. She'd be heading to the annex next. I was quietly relieved. Her purpose in coming here really was something else entirely. Not only had she not gotten in my way, she'd actually solved my problems for me twice now. But just as she was about to step through the door, she suddenly stopped. She snapped her head back around, and I had already vanished from where I'd been. I'd seen it coming and moved a breath before she turned. She frowned slightly, then decided it was probably her imagination and didn't linger. By that point, I had already slipped through to the entrance corridor of floor 10, the demon god's chamber. I took a deep breath and pushed open the door. There, at the center of the room, was the second demon god. It really had been a while since our last face-to-face. A system notification: second demon god, level 100, special trait, death supreme crown, all abilities of adventurers within the demon god's chamber reduced by 20%. The second demon god let out a warped laugh, muttering about which livestock had wandered into its room this time. It added that I was decent enough, all things considered, but I'd soon be joining the others lying on the floor. With that, it burst into loud, grating laughter. I looked around the room. Bodies were scattered everywhere. I thought to myself, quite the body count. I reached out with my senses. None of those bodies were giving off any magical energy anymore. Just as I was about to pull back my perception, I caught a faint, lingering presence. A man raised his head with great difficulty and told me in a weak voice to run. The moment those words left him, the second demon god attacked. I quickly stepped aside, noting internally that the first strike matched the game's setup. But just as the first demon god had moved in ways I hadn't expected, the second could do the same. I needed to stay sharp at every moment. The second demon god licked the corner of its mouth and said with hungry relish, "We adventurers were feeble and pathetic, but our flesh tasted rather good. With me, that made 10. It could finally have a proper feast tonight, first time in a while." The man, still barely clinging to life in the corner, heard those words and felt despair settle over him. He figured I was just walking into death like all the rest. The demon god came at me again quickly. This time, the attack speed was nearly too fast to track with the naked eye. I didn't meet it head-on. I activated Gale Shift immediately. In the instant I cleared the attack, my body appeared at the demon god's side. The short sword in my hand came slashing diagonally across its cheek. The man stared in stunned disbelief. He hadn't thought for a moment that I could actually wound this terrifying demon god. Blood poured down the demon god's face in an instant. The pain wrung a furious roar out of it. I told it to stop screaming. A cut like that was nothing to something like it. As I said that, the wound on the demon god's face began sealing rapidly. It grinned and said it was surprised I knew that. Not bad, for livestock. Then it launched at me again. The next second, thousands of ice spikes came driving toward me, but I had already read that every one of its techniques concentrated its force from directly above. The demon god assumed it had landed a hit. It boasted that I should be pulverized by now, but I had already warped to its back and driven my sword clean through its body. A system notification confirmed Eagle Eye had triggered. Damage doubled. The demon god fell to its knees, retching great mouthfuls of black blood. It couldn't believe a human had actually managed to wound it. I thought to myself, I had 3 pieces of hidden equipment now. There was absolutely no reason this should turn into a hard fight against the second demon god. But winning fast wasn't the goal this time. The plan was to push it without landing a killing blow, until it summoned the frozen chimera. With that in mind, I pressed the attack. But the demon god suddenly snatched up the body of a nearby fallen adventurer and thrust it in front of itself as a shield. I instinctively stepped back. I couldn't bring myself to strike. The demon god laughed its warped laugh and sneered that adventurers were nothing but hunks of meat that had already gone cold. cold. I frowned inwardly. This thing was proving to be a real problem. The demon god kept needling me, asking where all that confidence from earlier had gone. Then it raised its hand and activated the skill Frozen Dead Soldiers. In an instant, every adventurer it had killed before stiffened and rose to their feet, shambling their way toward me. The man who was still barely alive was filled with grief and fury. He couldn't bear to watch his companions be used like this even in death. The demon god then commanded the undead soldiers to kill me. I felt a jolt of alarm. This was clearly another attack style I had never seen before. Just like the first demon god, the second was also making moves that the game had never shown me. The second demon god scanned the undead and noticed something was off. It quickly spotted the one man still barely clinging to life. In that split second of distraction, I seized the opening and sliced off the hand it was reaching toward the man. The man's life was spared because of it. I turned to taunt the demon god. Stop looking around. I was its only opponent here. The demon god took the bait without hesitation, abandoned the man, and locked back onto me. A system notification appeared. The demon god had entered a poisoned state. Barely able to move, the demon god snarled and summoned the frozen chimeras. 3 frozen chimeras appeared, all level 99 monsters. I couldn't keep the quiet thrill out of my thoughts. Finally, they were here. The 3 creatures charged at me immediately. The demon god laughed in triumph and sneered that I'd gone so quiet. I must have been scared speechless. But I moved fast and took all 3 down without a pause. Not only had I cleanly secured the frozen chimera fangs, I'd also managed to push Centipede's edge durability below 500 in the process. 2 objectives with 1 move. Couldn't have gone better. I looked at the demon god's panicked expression and said calmly, "Sorry about that." Then in a cold, flat voice, I told it to go to hell. Meanwhile, over in the annex, the criminal guildmaster was still killing without pause. His strikes were vicious and merciless. The screams of adventurers being hunted down by him rang out one after another. The criminal guildmaster scowled impatiently and said all their screaming was giving him a headache. This was a decent place to hide, but cutting them down one by one was still too much of a hassle. The last remaining subordinate had been cornered and was certain his life was over. Then suddenly, a fierce gust of wind blasted into the room and sent the heavy sword flying right out of the criminal guild master's hand. Immediately after, the white-haired girl's voice rang out. "Found you," she said. She listed his crimes one by one, saying there weren't enough pages to write them all down. And at the end, just to extend his hiding time inside the dungeon, he had even turned on his own guild members. She called him what he was, a guild master who had fallen as low as anyone could fall. Then the white-haired girl activated her skills and summoned them in sequence. A water spirit, a fire spirit, and a wind spirit. The criminal guild master's face changed completely. He hadn't expected her to summon 3 top-tier spirits simultaneously. He forced himself to look composed and tried to figure out who she was. The white-haired girl replied coldly. She was exercising the authority of the 8 stars. He would be handed over to the Adventurers Association. On my end, a system notification appeared. The unlock condition for Centipede's Edge Skill 3 had been met. I felt a surge of quiet excitement. This was exactly the moment I'd been waiting for. The demon god raged and told me not to push my luck. It snarled that I was nothing but livestock. Then it swore it would tear me to pieces. Before it even finished speaking, it activated its ultimate skill. As the skill activated, a pair of enormous wings unfurled from the demon god's back. It launched itself straight up into the air. From its elevated position, the demon god looked down at me with utter smugness. It murmured to itself that there was nothing quite like the feeling of looking down from above. Seeing that, I immediately activated my own skill and rose into the air to meet it. I smiled and agreed. The view from up here really was something, especially when looking down at something like it. The demon god spun around sharply. It snarled that I'd better enjoy this moment. It was all I had left. It then summoned the Ice Annihilation Spear and drove it straight at me. Faced with the sudden attack, I sidestepped it without much effort. Using the opening, I activated Centipede's Edge Skill 3. A system notification described the skill, Liquefy. The blade could be melted into liquid form and reshaped freely according to the user's imagination. The demon god was still jeering, saying all I ever did was dodge. But before it finished the sentence, I was already swinging the liquefied blade toward it. The demon god stared at the enormous razor-sharp liquid blade before it, and frantically brought the spear up to block. I unleashed the move, Toxic Gate, Heaven Slash, and brought it crashing down. That single strike didn't just shatter the Ice Annihilation Spear, it split the demon god's entire body clean in 2. The next second, the system congratulated me on clearing the stage. It also noted that the second demon god clear had broken the fastest record for that dungeon. The surviving man stared at me, too stunned for words. I thought quietly, if everything followed the game's rules, he should be able to survive this. When the time limit expired, he'd be forcibly transported back to town. He'd face the penalty, but at least his life would be spared, because by the rules, any damage a player sustained was fully healed upon forced ejection. I looked down at the materials in my inventory. Only 1 item remained, ancient red clay, and then I could finally craft the cure-all medicine and save my mother. thunder. Suddenly, a violent tremor rolled through the ground. I moved quickly toward the source of the shaking. The white-haired girl was engaged in an intense battle with someone on the 7th floor of the annex, so that massive magical presence from before had been the criminal guildmaster, and he was the reason she'd come here too. The white-haired girl's expression was ice cold. She executed the technique, Mirage Breath. The fire spirit received the command and moved in to follow up. The attack sent a thunderous roar through the air. Against that assault, the criminal guildmaster simply swung his sword once. The fire spirit's entire offensive vanished without a trace. The white-haired girl clicked her tongue lightly. Then she issued another order, Water Spirit, Raging Torrent. The water spirit attacked, but the criminal guildmaster let out a dismissive scoff and called it child's play. Before the words finished leaving his mouth, he slashed through the current and effortlessly broke the water spirit's attack. From the shadows, I watched. The white-haired girl's ability was genuinely impressive. Summoning 3 high-tier spirits at once was no small thing. But the criminal guildmaster across from her was no lightweight either. Not only was he a formidable swordsman, he had also trained in dark magical energy. Looking at it, the outcome of this fight was genuinely hard to call. The criminal guildmaster then hinted that she still hadn't shown her real strength. In his view, if this was the best an 8-star could do, the title was being wasted on her. The moment he said that, the sword in his hand suddenly swelled and grew. His sword energy turned sharp and oppressive. Using the white-haired girl's brief moment of unawareness, he launched himself at her and unleashed the skill, Cyclone Slash. A blinding flash of sword light streaked across. The criminal guildmaster felt certain he had landed it. He said triumphantly, "It's over." He added dismissively that fighting women never felt satisfying. In his estimation, those spirits were just props, summoned for show and nothing more. But what he had cleaved through was nothing but an afterimage. The white-haired girl appeared behind him completely unharmed. Seeing that, I already knew she had this one. The criminal guildmaster spun around in shock. He couldn't believe what he was seeing and stammered, "Was that a mirage?" The white-haired girl looked down at him and said she was going to teach him a lesson. Him, a disgraced former 8-star who had been exiled by the association and chosen the wrong path. She told him to see for himself what a real attack looked like. The criminal guildmaster's eyes went wide. He sensed the presence and let out a sharp cry. The white-haired girl had summoned a 4th and even more powerful spirit, the thunder spirit, Kisu. The criminal guildmaster's face went white in an instant, and only then did he notice that water had been pooling beneath his feet for some time. He started to open his mouth to beg, but the white-haired girl cut him off without hesitation. She asked him coldly, when others had begged him, had he shown a single shred of mercy? Then she activated the skill, Rumble of the Gods. In an instant, rolling thunder crashed down. The criminal guildmaster was struck and hit the floor. The white-haired girl landed smoothly, murmured that the job was done. She glanced at the criminal guildmaster's sorry state and remarked that it was the kind of end that suited a villain. I thought quietly to myself, making an enemy of her would be a serious problem. Then suddenly, the white-haired girl's voice rang out, asking if I was hiding right there. My stomach dropped. She'd found me. I stepped out immediately and explained that I hadn't meant to spy. The white-haired girl shook her head and said she didn't mind. I hadn't gotten in the way of her mission either. She also brought up the fact that we'd each helped each other out once, like when the branch director had been there, so things were square between us. Then she mentioned that the demon god's presence had disappeared. She assumed I was the one who had taken it down. She offered her congratulations, then said she was pressed for time and needed to get going. She added that she had a feeling we'd run into each other again somewhere else. I watched her go, thinking, maybe so, but I hoped it would be as a friend rather than an enemy. One day later, at the Adventurers Association headquarters, the white-haired girl had successfully delivered the criminal guildmaster to prison. The vice president came forward at once with praise and gratitude. He said with satisfaction that this was a good opportunity to make an example out of him. He intended to formally disband the Serpent Wind Guild first, then do everything in his power to crack down on criminal activity inside dungeons. The white-haired girl acknowledged this and took on the next assignment. On my end, I had already arrived at the 3rd continent. Defeating the demon god here would yield the last material needed to craft the cure-all medicine. But right now, a pressing problem stood in the way. Centipede's edge's durability was no longer sufficient to take on the 3rd demon god. I needed to find the next piece of equipment first. That meant the 4th piece of hidden equipment, the soul-binding boxing wraps. I made my way to the main street of the 3rd continent and located a specific inn. A staff member stepped forward right away to greet me warmly. I gave the secret passphrase, one guest staying alone, but I'll need 2 rooms, room 1 on the north side and room 7 on the west. The staff member paused for a moment, then confirmed without hesitation. They led me toward a hidden entrance and wished me a good night's rest. I thought quietly to myself, that passphrase was only supposed to be learned after completing a certain hidden quest on the 5th continent. Fortunately, I'd memorized it when playing the game in a past life. It had come in useful at last. Through an underground passage, I arrived at the underground boxing ring. My eyes settled on the champion standing in the ring, hailed as the greatest of all time. His appearance gave off the energy of a comedic side character, but I knew very well that this man was anything but ordinary. There was no shortcut to getting that piece of hidden equipment. The only way was to get in the ring and face him directly. The host's voice rang out shortly after, announcing that the highlight of the night was about to begin. He introduced the red corner first, the champion, standing at 1.99 meters, the undefeated absolute champion. Then he introduced the blue corner, me, standing at 1.77 meters, a bright-eyed young man with black hair and blue eyes. After the introductions, the host outlined the rules. No equipment brought in from outside was permitted in this match. Format: 1 round of 3 minutes. Single round, winner takes all. The bell sounded, and the champion came in with a fierce opening assault. I dodged and blocked, privately marveling. The champion was exactly as I remembered. His speed was staggering. The host gave an excited commentary, noting with surprise that I had cleanly evaded the champion's high-speed combination. In truth, it was because I knew the champion would target my highest scoring areas right from the start. No matter how fast he was, if I knew which direction the attack was coming from, I could handle it calmly. The host exclaimed again that I had dodged multiple consecutive rounds of the champion's attacks. Remarkable, naturally. And I'd already predicted that his next move would be a right straight here. So rather than wait for him to throw it, I stepped in first and countered. Score: 1 point. The host went wild with excitement, announcing that the challenger had broken the deadlock and scored against the undefeated champion. The champion looked at me with a new kind of interest. He asked if I was the type to let a small lead go to my head. I raised an eyebrow and said of course not. I told him not to underestimate me and to show me what he really had. The champion gave a quiet scoff and said I was an interesting one. Then he declared it was his turn to go on the offensive. The moment he said that, a relentless barrage of punches came flying in. But no matter how fierce the assault, every attack was precisely predicted and successfully dodged. The champion kept throwing punches and commented that my eyes were exceptionally sharp. He also concluded that my stamina was nearly tapped out. I wouldn't hold on much longer. I gritted my teeth and kept repeating the same thing to myself. I cannot go down. Not once. Even if it cost me points, I had to defend with everything I had. In truth, what I was enduring right now was famously known in the game as a must-lose event, a stage that was never designed to be winnable. The core purpose of this moment was to advance the story through the player's defeat. The champion's mechanics were highly unusual. Every time an opponent scored against him, his power and speed increased by 1 more notch. The host was practically screaming his commentary, stressing that the champion had unleashed a relentless combination, the most ferocious assault yet. The champion pressed forward step by step, quietly certain that I no longer had the strength to fight back. But I was unusually calm. Even if I couldn't win the match, as long as I won the condition I needed, that was enough. The condition for obtaining the 4th piece of hidden equipment was to remain standing for the full 3 minutes. I tried to launch a counter, but the moment the attack went out, the champion batted it aside with ease. The champion looked mildly surprised. He said that after taking that many heavy hits, I could still raise my hands to fight back. His assault grew even sharper after that, each punch faster and more brutal than the last. A spark of excitement flashed through the champion's eyes. He said it had been a long time since he'd enjoyed a match this much, but the champion's throne was still his in the end. Before the words were fully out, the champion's hook crashed into my jaw. The force of the blow sent my head snapping back as I lurched backward. I barely managed to keep myself from going down. The host raised his voice in astonishment. The challenger had not been knocked down. He had survived the killing blow. The champion looked at me, and something like respect passed through his eyes. He shuffled in with small, measured steps and came at me with another punch. This time, I had no intention of dodging. I threw my own punch at the same moment he threw his. The host suddenly erupted. He couldn't believe it. In these desperate circumstances, the challenger had thrown a cross counter. He called it a stunning, spirit-filled exchange. The champion was pushed back half a step by my counter. He broke into a smile and acknowledged that one was well thrown. I steadied myself again and said he was every bit the undefeated champion he was said to be. Right then, the host announced the bell. Time was up. The match was officially over. The winner remained the champion. The champion walked over and said I was the first challenger to make it through 3 full minutes without going down once. He then told me to take his farewell gift. I smiled, accepted it, and thanked him. Gripping the item in my hand, I felt a surge of exhilaration. The 4th piece of hidden equipment was finally mine. Now that the new hidden piece was secured, there was no more time to drag my feet. I set out immediately and arrived at the S-rank dungeon of the 3rd continent before long. I already knew this entire dungeon contained no enemies other than the demon god itself. All I needed to do was defeat the demon god and the dungeon would be cleared. But the 3rd demon god was a phantom. The probability of encountering it was a mere 1%. Most people had no choice but to grit their teeth and search slowly before ever finding it. And so countless adventurers wore themselves down across that vast, empty wasteland, unable to even catch a glimpse of the demon god before being forced to give up. Of course, I had no time to spend on a search like that. If the demon god wouldn't show itself, I'd draw it out. I quickly located the key trigger that would force the demon god to appear. I moved to it right away and began shifting the coffin that served as the trigger. Then I pressed my hands together in an apologetic gesture and lifted the lid. The body inside the coffin began to glow immediately, and releasing the sleeping soul would guarantee the 3rd demon god's appearance. I watched the soul shoot upward into the sky. Lucifer's Halo Skill 2, mana sense, triggered passively, and picked up an enormous surge of magical energy. With a thunderous rumble, a powerful presence came rushing in at high speed. The next second, that presence erupted from the earth. It was the third demon god. The third demon god spoke, asking coldly if I was the one who had desecrated the dead. At the same time, a system notification appeared. Third demon god, level 150. Core trait, Scales of Judgment. As a guardian of the deceased, the third demon god existed to carry out this duty. Any act of contempt toward the dead would cause it to appear and deliver punishment. The demon god said in a cold voice that a sin this grave had to be paid for in blood, and it would bring judgment down upon this disrespectful intruder. At that, I immediately equipped the soul-binding boxing wraps I had just obtained. Almost the instant I finished equipping them, the demon god's trait, Scales of Judgment, activated. My soul was placed upon the scales by an invisible force. The demon god declared that it would purify my corrupted soul and return it to the heavens above. I could clearly feel my soul shifting and sinking on the scales. A system notification appeared. The Scales of Judgment had handed down a verdict against me. For the crime of soul desecration, all of my stats were immediately reduced by 30%. The demon god continued its decree. The sin of tampering with the souls of the deceased had to be repaid with my flesh, but all of this was within my expectations. The Scales of Judgment was a trait that inflicted debuffs on adventurers. This was the price that had to be paid for actively drawing the demon god out rather than searching for it. For me though, it simply meant the fight would be slightly more difficult, nothing more. The next step was to finish it before it made a move I hadn't seen coming. Combat broke out immediately. The third demon god opened with the magic Bullet of Yama. I knew that Lucifer's Halo's illusory skill would have no effect on a demon god, so this fight had to be a straight-up confrontation, no tricks. I clenched my fist and drove a punch straight at the demon god. The demon god reacted quickly and stepped out of the way with ease. Then it fired Bullet of Yama again. I immediately moved, dodge, jump, and as I cleared the attack, I drove another punch in hard. The demon god saw it coming and raised a weapon to block. Then it launched a magical counterattack. I sidestepped it again with precision. When I landed, it was immediately clear. My body was heavier than it should have been. The debuff was having a real effect, even if a small one. Then a system notification chimed suddenly. A call from my sister. My chest tightened. Had something happened to my mother? Before I could think it through, the third demon god's attack came in again. I barely got my arm up to block and twisted out of the way to avoid the killing blow. The situation was critical. I had absolutely no time to answer the call. I needed to end this fight as fast as possible. The third demon god fired Bullet of Yama again. I really had no more time to drag this out. I had to hit back now. I activated the soul-binding boxing wrap skill immediately. A system notification confirmed my attack power had doubled. I gathered my strength and drove a flaming fist forward. The punch landed clean on the demon god's face and sent it flying. The demon god shook its head and steadied itself, then said with contempt that I was laughable. It mocked the move. It had expected something impressive, but it turned out to just be a fist that was on fire. I raised an eyebrow inwardly. The way it said that sounded like pure bluster to me. The demon god scoffed and said I talked too much. It swore it would make sure I could never run that mouth again. A chill ran through me. I sensed immediately that whatever was coming next would not be simple. Sure enough, the demon god began charging up, then unleashed the skill, Pitch Black Meteor Fist. I threw myself aside with everything I had, but was still caught by the force of the blast and sent crashing. The demon god looked down at me and asked how that invisible punch had felt. I hauled myself back up, shaken. It had done exactly what I feared, an attack I had never seen before. What was going on with the demon gods in this real world? Why were their actions so completely different from the game's design? While I was turning that over in my mind, the call started ringing urgently again. This many calls in quick succession. Something serious had happened. The demon god remarked that I had managed to avoid that one. Not bad reflexes for a human. I wiped the blood from the corner of my mouth and told it to save the backhanded compliments. I knew the situation. The flame fist's power was high, but HP drained every second it was active. If I didn't end this fight quickly, I was done. Then my sister's call came through again, the ring sharp and insistent. The demon god seized the moment and came swinging at me again. A nameless dread rose suddenly in my chest. Defeating the demon god mattered, but in my heart, my family would always come first. There was no other way. I had to use that skill now. I activated Gale Shift immediately. My body vanished from the spot. The demon god looked around in confusion, wondering where I'd gone, but I had already warped to an open clearing, and quickly answered the call. I asked urgently what had happened. Why had she called so many times in a row? On the other end, my sister's voice was thick with tears. She asked frantically where I was. I told her to calm down, said I was in the middle of something and couldn't move right now, and asked her to tell me what was wrong. Hearing my voice, her crying grew louder. She said our mother had taken a sudden turn for the worse. The healer treating her had given up, said our mother didn't have much time left, and told her to get me back there now. Then suddenly, the demon god's voice appeared close by. It said furiously that I had the audacity to look down on it. I had no time for a longer conversation. I told my sister I was on my way home, then ended the call. The demon god snarled that I had desecrated the souls of the dead and now dared to think about running. That was something it would not allow. As it said that, it launched the pitch black meteor fist again. I narrowly dodged the attack. Then I immediately fired back with the flame fist. I declared that this fight ended here. The third demon god blocked my attack without effort. In its view, an offensive like this couldn't possibly end anything. A cold smile pulled at my mouth. The flame fist's damage was still accumulating. calculating. The third demon god dismissed it and fired pitch black meteor fist again. I met it head-on with the flame fist, doubling the attack power, while quietly building up another skill on the side. This skill was the soul-binding boxing Raps' skill 2, cross counter. Its special effect, recording every hit it had absorbed, then releasing all of it back at 3 times the force. The third demon god was still mocking me non-stop, convinced I was just flailing uselessly. The instant it finished speaking, my fist, carrying doubled attack power and 3 times the reflected force, crashed into the third demon god's face. The third demon god was sent flying by the sheer force of the impact. It hit the ground hard. A stream of blood burst from its mouth. I caught my breath and told it that it had been a fool. My skills doubling had stacked on top of the force its own attack had brought. That was why I was certain the fight was over. A system notification appeared. Third demon god successfully defeated. A large amount of experience and rewards had been earned, and the material I urgently needed, ancient red clay, had dropped. With the material in hand, I made for home as fast as I could, back to the village on the outskirts of the first continent. As I neared the house, the weight of the atmosphere inside was palpable before I even reached the door. I pushed it open and went in. My sister immediately rose to meet me, crying as she told me the doctor had diagnosed our mother with end-stage mana deficiency. Black marks had appeared on her body, and she had fallen unconscious. Even a high-tier healer had been powerless. There wasn't much time left. My sister was barely holding herself together. I gently placed a hand on her shoulder and told her I was going to treat our mother right now. Both the doctor and my sister went still at those words. I had no time to explain. I immediately opened my stats panel and poured every SP I'd accumulated from leveling up straight into the intelligence attribute. Then I laid out every material I had gathered: ancient red clay, frozen chimera fangs, and tears of a high-tier fairy. I activated my class skill and began the compound. The next second, a system notification appeared: cure-all successfully crafted. Its effect was clearly stated. A single dose would completely recover the user from any abnormal status and illness. The doctor beside me stared in disbelief and asked if this was truly the legendary cure-all. He said he had seen it recorded in text before. I nodded and walked quickly to my mother's bedside. Truth be told, this had been part of the reason I chose the compounder class from the very beginning. Not only for the hidden equipment, but to save my mother. I carefully lifted her and gently helped her drink the cure-all. I called out softly for her to wake up. Not long after she swallowed it, the black marks on her body began to slowly fade. A little while later, she slowly opened her eyes. When she made out my face and my sister's, she looked confused. My sister let out a sound somewhere between shock and joy, and threw herself into our mother's arms. I felt a wave of quiet relief wash over me and called out, "Mom." I asked her how she was feeling. Our mother took a moment, then said, "There's nothing wrong anywhere. She felt fine." Through tears, my sister told her that if I hadn't come back and treated her, she would be gone by now. The doctor chimed in as well. After years of practice, this was the first time he had ever seen symptoms vanish like this. The cure-all had genuinely worked. Our mother looked bewildered and said a cure-all wasn't something you could just get your hands on easily. She couldn't help but suspect I had gone off to become an adventurer. I quickly tried to change the subject, saying what mattered most was that she was all right. But our mother's expression turned serious. She said no, it was not all right at all. I was taken aback. I hadn't expected that reaction. Our mother continued. She had already thought something was off when I suddenly left home. She demanded to know why I had abandoned her and my sister to go and do something as dangerous as being an adventurer. I tried to explain, but our mother wasn't hearing a word of it. I thought to myself, half amused, the cure-all really had worked better than expected. She'd only just woken up and already had more energy than ever. Our mother started in on me in earnest. The doctor, sensing the moment, quietly excused himself. My sister stepped in to calm things down, explaining that I had done all of this to save her. Our mother sighed and admitted she already knew that, but then her tone shifted. She asked what would have happened if I'd gotten hurt or worse in the process of saving her. After a while, her voice gradually softened. She said, "Since you're back safe, you'd better hurry up and go defeat those demon gods." I felt a complicated tug in my chest. That turnaround came out of nowhere. Our mother smiled and said she'd been my mother long enough to know how I thought. She said the look in my eyes right now was just like my father's had been. She knew I had things I wanted to achieve as an adventurer. She told me to go without worrying, but she had 2 conditions. First, to let her know I was still alive, I had to contact home every single day. Second, no matter what happened, I absolutely could not die. Then our mother quietly pulled me into a hug and whispered her thanks. She told me again and again to be careful out there. I stepped out of the house with a lot weighing on my mind. The mana deficiency our mother had suffered was an incurable disease caused by monsters. Thankfully, the cure-all had treated it, but there were countless others facing the same fate. Only by defeating every demon god and creating a world free of monsters could this disease be eliminated for good. But in the game, even after defeating all 7 demon gods, monsters had never disappeared. That suggested something else was at work, a 8th demon god that I had never managed to find in my past life. And that one was likely the key to everything. With my thoughts sorted out, I arrived at the tournament arena on the 4th continent. The moment I walked in, the host's voice rang out, announcing that the 11th Grand Adventurer Tournament was about to begin. The atmosphere here was just as electric as I remembered. round. This tournament was open to adventurers from all 7 continents. The entry-level requirement was level 10, but there were no restrictions on class, skills, or equipment. To defeat every demon god in the shortest possible time, I needed to grow stronger than I was now. While the tournament offered a grand prize of 1 billion gold, that wasn't what anyone here was actually after. What everyone truly had their eyes on was the second place prize, something only available here. That was the class advancement tome, an item that could take any adventurer to the next level entirely. The host continued explaining the rules. The preliminary round would measure each participant's magical power and attack strength. Competitors would then be ranked by the combined total of both scores, and the top 8 would advance to the elimination round. The host had everyone place their hands on the magic circles in front of them for measurement. After a moment, the host announced that the magical power results were in. I looked up at the rankings board and searched for my name. I was dead last, sitting comfortably at the very bottom. Sure, compounders naturally had low magical power, and at below level 10, I was probably the only one here in that range. But how exactly was I supposed to win from here?